Welcome into the Irish NFL show presented by Matchbook Betting Exchange and also Trust Gaming. Before we start tonight on Championship Sunday, we're presented by Matchbook Betting Exchange. £20, €20 gives you a welcome offer, money back as cash if your first bet loses. Irish NFL show is the code, T's and C's are below. And we have a great offer, anytime touchdown scores coming later on in the show. Championship Sunday weekend preview, Colin Cronin, welcome in. How are you? Excited?
Yeah, I mean, look, last weekend was probably the greatest weekend to play football we've ever had. I cannot wait to see. The NFL always finds new ways to excite us, new ways to surprise us. So I am looking forward to seeing what these two games have this weekend, and four fascinating teams, two brilliant matchups.
Absolutely, and thank you to thousands of people who watched us last weekend. Brian and Mark will be in at some point in the show as well. Got Jeff Reinbold and our game picks coming up. First guest tonight is an afternoon host on ESPN 1530 and also on the radio in Cincinnati and a contributor to The Athletics. We're delighted for the first time ever to welcome in Mo Egger to the Irish NFL show. Mo, a hell of a weekend to make your debut on the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Your team wins and suddenly people want to talk to you, so that's kind of cool.
Mo, have you ever had the chance to come to Ireland before?
No. It's funny because a buddy of mine, for his job, ended up having to go to Dublin for 8 months. And so I swore I was going to go visit. I swore I was going to go see him, and we couldn't make it happen. But I've wanted to go for a long time. I've actually seen the Bengals play in London twice. And we were trying to figure out a way to do a side trip to Ireland, and it fell apart as well. But I badly want to go.
Who knows, Mo? Maybe you'll be visiting with the Lombardi Trophy in the next time you come over. Look, what a season, as Michael has said. And, I suppose there were people who thought that the Bengals might go to the playoffs before the season began. And then there were plenty of doubters, and there were plenty of people who said that things should have been different in the draft. People questioning Zach Taylor. Talk to us, I suppose, about the feeling in Cincinnati right now. This team stands on the precipice of the Super Bowl, going into Kansas City. Okay, it's away in Arrowhead, but this is a team I don't think they're going to have any fear of the Chiefs, right?
Yeah, I don't think the team is afraid of anybody, and I think that emanates from the quarterback. Joe Burrow is I think he has very slowly started to change the mindset here among fans, where in Cincinnati, we always expect the other shoe to drop, if you will. We always are wondering what's lurking around the corner that's going to sort of bring on doom and gloom, and Joe has sort of come to town and basically, look, I don't care about the past. I don't care about what the Bengals haven't been able to do in the past. We're different. This is a new era. We're going to get going and we're going to be good. And so I don't know. They're playing an opponent they just beat less than 4 weeks ago and offensively had their way with for much of that game. So there's every reason for this team to be confident about the matchup. The environment is going to be very, very challenging. And look, at the end of the day, it's Patrick Mahomes who's the most gifted, at least in terms of physical gifts, quarterback on the planet. But, you asked about what it's like here. You guys know, I'm sure, but this is a city with a history of bad NFL fortunes. The Bengals have obviously never won a championship. It's been more than 3 decades since they made it this far. And before they beat the Raiders, it had been 31 years since they won a one playoff game. So the history of losing has sort of loomed over this franchise and loomed over the city to an extent for a while. And so there's just nothing but giddiness and happiness and excitement. And much of it's based on the opportunity in front of the Bengals on Sunday. Much of it's based, I just think, in the sense that this is the start of something sustainable and the start of something that could be kind of a recurring thing. The Bengals at least playing in the playoffs and ideally playing in more AFC championship games and maybe playing in more than one Super Bowl and maybe even winning more than one Super Bowl. And it's so interesting how in this sport, one person can just drastically change the mindset. Joe Burrow has done that, and by extension, this team has done that. At the same time, I think Sunday's also being looked at as an opportunity that you don't know when it's going to come around again. You only get so many chances for something special, and as much as we could talk about how good the Bengals might be moving forward, we simply don't know. What we do know is they've got a chance on Sunday to get to a Super Bowl, and so I do think there's something to be said about, hey, you don't know when you're going to have a shot at this again. You better take advantage when you do.
You mentioned there the couple of London games you've been to, Mo. We had Elise Jessie on last week, and I was telling her the first London game I had been to was that Washington Cincinnati game, and I'll never forget texting my wife at like 8 o'clock in London, going, "I'm still here." That team's come a long way, Mo. It's come a long way since then. But I still like, and this is the thing about the Bengals. I think for European fans, they have such a likable fan base, and they've obviously come a long way from the days of Andy Dalton, but it's been an intriguing few years.
It has. I go back to the game in London 2 years ago. The Bengals were playing the Rams. Cincinnati was 0-8, I think, coming into that game, and there was every reason to not want to go. There was every reason to not, if you're a Bengals fan in London, go, yeah, you know what? They were here in 2016. I've kind of moved on, and yet it was remarkable to run into so many loyal Bengals fans from that part of the world. It wasn't just folks from the UK. I met a gentleman from Germany who talked about Cincinnati in terms that I was shocked to hear. He's like, wow, you're from Cincinnati. It's like, yeah. But the enthusiasm for the Bengals was really cool. And to me, that goes to show why so many of us have longed for this team to be good again, have longed for this team to give fans a payoff for their patience, because there are so many people around the world who care deeply about this team, despite its relatively checkered history. And so for folks like that, and folks obviously here in town, to have that payoff, to have this to rally around and be excited about, is really cool. And I think all of us thought it was going to happen at some point. I think if you would have said to me 2 years ago, when I was in London, within the next 2 years, your team is going to be 60 minutes away from the Super Bowl, I would have said, well, did the rest of the league contract? What happened? And yet here we are. If you look at it in the grand scheme of things, no team in the history of the league has ever won 6 games in 2 seasons combined, and then in the third year played in a conference championship game. And the Bengals have done that, and it's pretty remarkable.
Absolutely. And obviously, look, we talked about Burrow and his influence, not just in the team, but and the franchise, but maybe on the city. But I suppose the offense, and we might talk more, but the other thing that has stood out to me this year watching the Bengals from here is Trey Hendrickson and how good he has been. And a guy who, I suppose, with early in his career, he had that breakout year in 2020, and maybe some people had concerns, could he continue that? Not only has he continued it, he's set a new career year. Can you talk to us about Hendrickson and maybe his impact, and I suppose how you think that the Bengals defense will approach the game at the weekend?
Yeah, Trey has been, I think he'll go down as one of the best free agent acquisitions in this team's history. And, there's something to be said about how the Bengals have historically not really embraced free agency until the last 2 years. And they've done a really good job of acquiring players, especially on defense, who have come in and made a difference. And I'm not sure there's anybody on that list who's done more than Trey Hendrickson. And you're right. If you looked at what he did in New Orleans last year, certainly you could respect what he did statistically, but we did sort of a dive into, well, okay, why did he suddenly have this breakout season? And the reality was there were a lot of sacks that he picked up on third and longs where the team had no choice but to pass, and he beat his guy. He had some coverage sacks. So yeah, there were legitimate questions about, well, did you get a guy who had this sort of outlier, insanely good year that was in part a byproduct of the defense that he had been on, or is he a guy who's just now starting to ascend? And the answer has obviously been the latter. He has been a difference maker for this team. And remember, they let Carl Lawson go in free agency, and Carl had a good year last year. And so there's a lot of people who viewed that as a minus, a step down. Maybe you would have rather had Carl Lawson. And unfortunately for Carl, he got injured during training camp with the Jets, and we didn't get a chance to do at least a 2021 side-by-side comparison. But Trey has been better than anybody ever could have expected. He's been their best pass rusher, and they're going to need him to have a big game on Sunday. This defense, I think the key to what we've seen here in these 2 playoff games, number one, they've gotten huge play from their linebackers. That's got to continue on Sunday. This is a team that for years, my biggest complaint was how bad they've been at linebacker. Jermaine Pratt had the game-ending pick against Las Vegas. Logan Wilson had the game-changing pick against Tennessee. Those guys are going to have an impact. The Bengals statistically are one of the worst teams in the NFL at giving up yardage to tight ends over the middle. George Kittle gashed him. Mark Andrews gashed him. Darren Waller of Las Vegas had a good game in the regular season. Travis Kelce is in a class by himself. And so I really wonder, how are they going to sort of account for him? The other name I think to pay attention to is Jesse Bates. Jesse Bates last year was, I thought, their best player, and a guy that we spent a lot of time this past offseason talking about the Bengals giving a huge contract to, because Jesse believes, and a lot of people believed, he might be the best safety in football. Well, in the regular season, he was up and down. There were times I thought he was okay. There were times where I thought he performed very, very poorly. In the postseason, he's been excellent. He set the tone for Saturday against Tennessee with that pick to start the game. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs can beat you downfield. Kansas City Chiefs can also beat you with a lot of yards after the catch. I think that puts a great premium on safety play. You look at Von Bell, but if Jesse Bates can play the way he has the first two games, then I think this defense has a chance to not stop Kansas City. You're not going to do that, but to at least slow them down and limit the big plays.
It's going to be such a great game. And one thing, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mo, I've seen Paul Brown Stadium, they've tried to replicate the noise from Arrowhead over the last couple of days. I mean, man,
Yeah.
even last week watching that Bills-Chiefs game, the sound is crazy.
You know, I was lucky enough to go to a game in 2018. The Bengals played there on a Sunday night, and they were curb stomped by that Chiefs team that was just sort of coming together. And I knew Arrowhead Stadium had a reputation for being loud. It was easily the loudest NFL environment that I've ever been in. So it's real. What I would say is, though, Joe Burrow has played in the Southeastern Conference in college football. He's played in stadiums that have 100,000 people. He's played in championship games. He's played in tough environments. And so I think in terms of just the intimidation factor of the environment itself, I tend to think that's not going to be a huge deal. But in a game like this, especially when you're a quarterback coming off a 9-sack game, communication is going to be at a premium, and so you're going to have to figure out a way to work through some of the crowd noise issues. I know it's something they've been addressing all week long, but it's going to be a variable that's there, and I think it always is there when you play Kansas City. Buffalo had the benefit of playing at Arrowhead Stadium earlier this year. The Bengals have not, and so that's going to be worth paying attention to. There's no doubt about it.
And I suppose then, look, we've talked a little bit about Burrow, but in terms of how you think that the Bengals are going to approach this, I saw some stats in terms of the matchup just a few weeks ago, and it was all stuff towards the sidelines. Burrow did not attack the middle of the field at all. Do you expect kind of that's going to be the game plan again this time around?
I think it's going to be really interesting to see what the Chiefs do with Jamar Chase, because I know if a guy went off for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns against me the first go around, I'd say, well, defensively, we're not going to let that happen. And so Jamar, you know, he picked up his yardage in a variety of different ways, but you tend to think of his biggest plays this year. They've been, you know, streak routes to the outside of the field. And then you look at, okay, well, what can they do in the middle of the field? That's where you look for Tyler Boyd to potentially have a big game. I think the way the Bengals handle this is going to be really, really interesting, because at the end of the year, they opened things up and they threw the ball more on first down. And they certainly did against Kansas City. And the fact that they were playing from behind so often might have had something to do with that. If you were to ask Bengals fans what's your biggest complaint about this team, they would say that sometimes the offense gets a little bit too conservative and they run a little bit too frequently on early downs, 21 times on first and second down against Las Vegas with pretty limited effectiveness. So I think one of the interesting things about this game is going to be, how do they come out? Are they going to come out and say, we're winning a shootout, and so we're going to go maybe empty backfield, and Joe, we're going to give you 5 passing targets and you're going to have to make the right read? Or is it, we're not winning in Kansas City if we don't run the football effectively, keep Patrick Mahomes off the field, try to slightly at least win the time of possession battle? And I could see Cincinnati approaching this from either standpoint. Remember, what skewed things in the first game was they were down 14-0, and it felt like for a while, if Cincinnati was going to win the game, they would have to score on every single possession. Is that the plan moving forward? And if it is, then I think you're going to see him throw it all over the joint. I think you're going to see him throw it in the middle of the field and try to get CJ Uzama going. I think you'll try to see them throw the ball to Joe Mixon. And I think you can throw to your running back against this Kansas City defense. And obviously you're going to take advantage of your targets on the outside. But I've seen the Bengals go conservative before, and so I don't think it's going to surprise anybody if this team goes conservative. And look, as you and I sit here right now, unless something has happened this morning, Tyrann Mathieu is still in the NFL's concussion protocol, and his absence was you couldn't escape it in watching the Buffalo game. Those Kansas City secondary guys looked like they had just met each other that day. They sorely missed somebody in the middle of the field. And so if I'm a Chiefs fan, we still have a couple of days, and my guess is he will play. But if for some reason he can't go, then I think you're going to see Cincinnati just do everything they can to kind of do what Buffalo did and find holes in the middle of the field in that secondary.
Well, you've been extremely generous for your time. I know it's an extremely busy time for you guys over in Cincinnati. Just finally, what's the vibe like? Because any Bengals fan I've talked to, I said, would you go to LA in a couple of weeks? They're all saying, no, I'll if we win, I'll go to Cincinnati. So what's the vibe like there? And who have you got for this game on Sunday? Surely you're picking the Bengals, yeah?
Well, the vibe here is incredible. And look, it always is when you have an NFL team that's playing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. I'm sure the vibe in Kansas City is pretty insane as well. But the unexpected nature of this, the fact that they've never won a title, the fact that nobody expected this team to be very good this year, I think has added a dimension to it that is just sort of amplified the excitement. In terms of the game itself, you know, there's the part of me that says, God, I don't know that I could pick against Joe Burrow. I certainly think the Bengals are going to cover the 7 points. I think I feel pretty good about that. I feel pretty good about taking the over in this game. There's a handful of prop bets that I think could be pretty interesting. I think it's hard to pick the Bengals to win the game outright against Kansas City, if I'm being completely honest. There's what my heart wants. There's what my head says. If this was almost any opponent in the NFL, I think I would pick Kansas City to beat them in their building. But what I've said all week long is if you give me a chance with Joe Burrow having the ball in his hands and the Bengals within a score in the fourth quarter, I'm going to feel pretty good about my chances. So from a Cincinnati standpoint, yes, you would love it if you could play from ahead and blow them out. If this game is in doubt in the fourth quarter and Joe's got the ball in his hands, I think Bengals fans should be pretty good. And I at least hope we get that. And I think we get something pretty close to that on Sunday.
Yeah, well, certainly I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. I know in Ireland we love an underdog, so I know there'll be plenty of people on this little island cheering on the Bengals. And look, when it comes to this time of the year, you always want to see the best players go up against one another. And I think in Mahomes versus Burrow, you have two of the top quarterbacks, not just in the AFC, but across the NFL. So, Mo, we want to thank you for taking the time to join us and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
After what can only be described as a classic last week, I mean, do I even say the word classic? The game was incredible. The Kansas City Chiefs host the Cincinnati Bengals in the AFC Championship this Sunday. And on the Irish NFL Show Championship Sunday preview special episode, we're delighted to bring in Mark. First off, Mark, you weren't in the first call, but also to bring in a special guest, Matt Derrick, obviously a beat writer at ChiefsDigest.com and a contributor on many other outlets as well. Matt, it's great to have you on again after the last few weeks, and also thank you very much for coming on at what is really a very busy time of year.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you guys again. Had a great time last time.
Well, since the last time you were on, it's been a bit mad. I mean, last week may have been, I think, for a neutral, never mind a fan of the Chiefs. Look, seriously, one of the best games ever. Like, you know, it had everything. How can we top it this week?
I don't see how you can top that. I mean, that was one for the ages. I've seen some crazy games with certainly the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, the AFC Championship game with the Patriots a few years ago, back in 2018 was insane. That 54-51 Rams shootout on a Monday night in Mexico was crazy. I don't see how you're going to top, you know, what the Chiefs and the Bills put on the other night. I mean, that was just two quarterbacks having absolutely incredible nights. I mean, how you're going to have two quarterbacks have a game like that against each other again. I mean, Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes have a challenge ahead of them, and maybe based on what we saw in the regular season, maybe they can match it. We'll see.
Well, I suppose one of the things that the Chiefs would be hoping for, if to stop Burrow, kind of matching that game from earlier in the season, is for Chris Jones to, I suppose, replicate Jeffrey Simmons. And we talked, I think, the last time we had you on about, Jones and moving, back inside. But given what that matchup that the Titans had, they got 9 sacks. Obviously, they didn't put the points up. You would expect if the Chiefs did that. But what do you expect the Chiefs to do the last time they, in terms of blitzing, or what do you expect the Chiefs to do on defense?
Well, I think the conventional wisdom here is that certainly if the Chiefs look at what they did against the Bengals the last time around, and certainly the success that the Titans had, you can't blitz. I mean, that's what Steve Spagnuolo did against Joe Burrow last time, and it did not end well. I mean, for the most part, because Joe Burrow, I think is one of those quarterbacks that if you give him just 2.5 seconds to throw the football, he's going to just chuck it up to Jamar Chase and Tyler Higgins and TJ Boyd and these guys that can just go up and catch the football. He's got the receivers to do that. I think the Titans have shown that, Burrow, if you force him to hold on to the football, he has a tendency to hold on to it for a little bit too long. And that Bengals offensive line can't block forever. So I would certainly expect the Chiefs to do the exact opposite this time around, which is really to rely on that front four with Chris Jones, with Melvin Ingram, Frank Clark, to try and get pressure on Burrow and defend. I mean, it might even just be borrowing some of the same coverages and some of the same defenses that teams have thrown against Patrick Mahomes this season. I think you're just doing everything that you can to make sure that Burrow just, can't get those one-on-one matchups with Jamar Chase and some of the other guys that they had such success with the last time around.
Matt, I've often used a Top Gun reference or two on this show, and I've used a Top Gun reference to refer to the NFL and actually to the Chiefs. I have the need for speed. And the Top Gun songs apply to their season. I mean, you started off the season and you've lost that love and feeling. You go through the danger zone, and ultimately AFC a divisional game, and then it's a championship game. You get back to taking my breath away. If we look at the Chiefs' offense versus that Bengals defense, and the Bengals defense played lights out against Tennessee, but you would argue a much more limited offense. The Chiefs' offense, whether it's obviously the contributions they're now getting from McKinnon, from Pringle, from Robinson, and the Maverick and Goose, or however you want to play it, the Goose and Iceman to Patrick Mahomes' Maverick, if you like. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce can run riot on any defense. How do you see that matchup playing? And do you think that they are going to strategically have an advantage in this dogfight this weekend?
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison. I think Patrick Mahomes would probably like that comparison too. I think that the one thing that's in this matchup that I think is probably the biggest challenge for the Bengals is that I think they put everything that they had into that matchup the last time. There aren't any surprises. There's nothing that I think that they can do at this point that's going to take the Chiefs by surprise, and particularly on the defensive side, they're going to have to mix up things a little bit, because remember the Chiefs had a pretty good day offensively against the Bengals too on that afternoon. If their defense had merely just gotten a stop or two, they could have won that game, and certainly had their way early in that matchup. So I think the Chiefs feel pretty good about what they're doing from an offensive standpoint. I think they feel like they certainly match up. But you know what? I don't even know if we can really draw a lot of conclusions from the regular season in this Chiefs offense, because they have a switch. There is something that a place that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill go to once the postseason starts, that I just don't see a lot of other players doing it. And Mahomes in particular, I mean, has he had bad stretches? Certainly he'll say that the first Super Bowl, he had some bad stretches against the 49ers. The entire offense, the entire team had some bad stretches in that Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. But outside of that, certainly in the AFC playoffs, Mahomes has been unstoppable. And until someone comes up and can prove that they can do that, I'm going to expect that Mahomes is going to be able to have this way in the playoffs, because I think we've almost reached a point that, and he would never put it this way and never confess to it, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think almost the Mahomes and this Chiefs offense has gotten to a point where they know that the season starts in January. And I'm not sure that the first 18 weeks for them are just trying to get through, school to the final week of the season when you finally get to put it all on the field, because I think they were bored at times during the regular season. And you see when Patrick Mahomes is focused, what he can do. And he's been focused the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting to watch the Chiefs on the field the last few weeks. Our first guest, Matt, was a guy called Mo Egger from Cincinnati, ESPN Radio, and he was. I was asking him about the current situation in Cincinnati. They're practicing in the stadium with the noise full pelt. For fans, maybe over here, can you maybe describe what the atmosphere in Arrowhead's like? Because, as I said in the previous call, it sounded incredible last week.
Yeah, and Arrowhead Stadium has a reputation for being the loudest stadium in the NFL. Certainly, they have the Guinness Book of World Records as being the loudest stadium, and part of it, honestly, is just the acoustics of the stadium. I mean, you talk a lot about college stadiums here in the United States. Can have stadiums with 100,000 people in it, and Arrowhead obviously doesn't have that. It's in the mid 70s. But whereas a lot of those college stadiums are kind of flat and spread out, Arrowhead is 9 stories tall. I mean, it kind of goes straight up, so that sound has absolutely nowhere to go but down onto the field. And I think that's certainly one factor that makes a difference. I mean, the other thing is that Kansas City fans obviously take their football and their partying seriously. So I'm sure you've heard over there about the tailgating and everything that goes into it. I mean, for Chiefs fans, it's an all-day affair. So for a 2:00 kick, they're going to start partying at 6:00 in the morning and not stop. So they do take it seriously. And I've had a chance to go around a lot of other NFL stadiums, and it's not that other teams don't have dedicated fans, but and Kansas City football is king, and that's the one thing that they really lay their hat on, is being able to make noise during game day.
Yeah, the 9 stories though, Matt. I think Jordan Love's mother knows all about those. But in terms of noise, we've been fortunate. We had Mike Wall, who's a former Packer, on here, and he said that Arrowhead was the loudest away stadium he'd been to. We had Lawrence Tynes, who talked about the noise at Arrowhead. So even everyone who's played elsewhere talks about it. But just to take you back, he spoke to us a little bit about Mahomes in the playoffs, but there'd been a clip going around this week of Travis Kelce, and Kelce kind of talking on just before the 13 seconds and what he needed to do, and Patrick kind of saying, Go Kelce, just do your thing. We've heard that before. Like earlier in the season, Kelce had kind of talked about, I just get into and Patrick tells me, go find space, I find space, and he'll find me. And people kind of initially maybe dismissed that a little bit. Yeah, that's just Kelce kind of talking. But then we see evidence of it the other night. And I mean, we had the Lakewood Police Department even tweeting today, kind of urging drivers to give as much space as the Bills defense gave to Kelce. Can you just talk to us about Travis, and in terms of what he becomes and how important he is to this team?
Yeah, and I think that's something that probably gets overlooked quite a bit, is just how much Travis Kelce has grown and matured over the years. Because what you saw in that clip, that's not what Travis Kelce would have been doing 5 or 6 years ago. And maybe some of that is the relationship. He and Patrick certainly have a different relationship than he and Alex Smith had. Not there was anything wrong with Alex Smith, but I think that Mahomes and Kelce, they have a camaraderie off the field too. I mean, it's hard to see any major sporting event in the United States that Patrick Mahomes has not taken Travis Kelce to. They were at the national college basketball championships. They've been at national college football championships. They're going to NHL games. They're going to NBA games together. Anywhere. I mean, and then once again, I mean, that just goes to the friendship that they have off the field, and it certainly translates on. I mean, and the fact that Andy Reid has encouraged that too, because he sets the tone for these guys to be able to speak their minds and to come up with their own ideas and to give their own input. And like I said, I mean, this is I think that's something that from not just a maturity standpoint, but from even a football IQ standpoint, I'm not sure that Travis Kelce does 5 years ago. But now those guys are just on a page where they can do that. It doesn't always work. We've seen it, that there have been times when they do freelance a little bit and they miss connections. But then again, I mean, it comes back to that when the lights are on, these guys seem to take their focus to another level. And I think you saw that in those 13 seconds.
Matt, I think you mentioned the Guinness Book of Records for Arrowhead. I think that was the 42-14 game against the Patriots, if I remember rightly. So they had plenty to cheer about that day. So fair play to the Chiefs that day, obviously. And the atmosphere in Arrowhead must be amazing. And look, I know the National Football League sometimes stands for not for long. And we want to look forward. We always want to look to the future, the next thing. Obviously, in this instance, the next game, which happens to be the AFC Championship game. And it feels bad to keep bringing you back to last week, but we are talking about one of the greatest games in NFL history. I don't think there's any question about that. And just coming back to that 13 seconds, and we've heard the lines, Andy Reid's Patrick Mahomes, when things are grim, be the Grim Reaper. And he only took 13 seconds to steal 53 people's souls on that field. But I have to ask you, around the press box, looking down at the field, looking down at the players there, because you're in that atmosphere, it's dead. People are not quite giving up on the team, but Bill's score with 13 seconds to go, it looks pretty damn grim, to take Andy Reid's line. Just kind of explain to us what was going on. I mean, what was their general, it's done now. Was there a giving up in sense of the fans or the press, or did you see some of that on the sidelines? Or what really did you notice in that moment as it was happening live?
Yeah, and the press box, is a very unusual environment to watch a game because it's, technically a professional environment. So you're even told no cheering in the press box. And that's even despite the fact that, there are team employees from both teams that are in the press box. And they try to follow that too. But, certainly you get a big play in those last few seconds and you can hear whether it's hands pounding on desks in front of them, you can hear the Cincinnati, personnel and the Chiefs personnel and other parts of the press box getting excited. But, in our section, with the reporters, there's a lot of just exclamations. I probably took the Lord's vein and name a couple of times. But, and that's, because that's like I said, you're not supposed to cheer and nobody really is. But at the same time, you see these dramatic plays and it's just, what did I just see? And, and those types of exclamations. So there was certainly a little bit of noise. Like I said, there's not whooping and hollering or cheering. It's more of the what? Wow. And honestly, when Mahomes releases some of his throws, sometimes it's even just laughter at what we just saw. But you're right. With 13 seconds left, it was pretty quiet. But then again, at the same time, those of us who have seen the Chiefs pull off some of these crazy comebacks before, we're sitting there and saying, okay, well, I mean, they got 3 timeouts left. They got a chance. I mean, they probably need to get to the 40-yard line. I mean, can they do that? And then when we saw the Buffalo defense, it was like, they might be able to get to the 40 here. So, I mean, I with 13 seconds left, I should have absolutely been saying, there's no way the Chiefs are going to do this. But there was just that little, just something tagging, just kind of tugging in my mind. I think they might be able to get in position to get a field goal to tie this. And look what happened.
Just history, and you're talking about the press box there. For anyone watching this, it isn't aware, for example, the press box we were in Tottenham was outside. It was literally in this. It was obviously a pre-made, but it was in the stands, and it was a wee bit crazy. And you're completely right. When you're in a press box in the States, the silence is just, sometimes when there's something serious happening, it's very, very hard to maybe console yourself. So I can completely understand that. And one thing I wanted to talk about, just the final round of questions here very quickly, Matt, before we round up this AFC Championship preview. Harrison Butker, who was on our show, I think, guys, July, August? Great guy. Had played in Dublin before as well. And he was very, very good to speak to us. He missed 2 kicks last week and then came back at the end of that game and done that. I mean, you're talking complete clutch situations, Matt. That was, to actually do that when the whole country, never mind a lot of people around the world are watching you. It was a fantastic comeback for him.
Yeah, it really was, and I'm not sure I've ever seen a kicker with just the kind of mentality that Harrison Butker does, because I think would be very easy for a kicker to kind of get into his head, especially after 2 kicks, and to doubt himself. Harrison Butker is never going to doubt himself. That is the most self-confident kicker that I've ever seen in my entire life, and he's surprised anytime that he makes a kick, because he's just that confident it's going to go in. And the Chiefs were certainly confident. I mean, they had no worries. I mean, hey, kickers miss extra points, things like that happen. And even though it wasn't particularly, windy or anything of that, it was very cold at Arrowhead. And it will probably be warmer this weekend than it was last weekend. And you could certainly even tell during warmups that, he just didn't have quite the leg that he usually has. In warmups, he'd hit from 56, and normally he would at least try something from 60 or beyond, and he didn't even try that during pregame. So you knew that there would be a little bit of a less of a distance there. So I think he kind of took it in stride, the miss. He kind of realized that, hey, I need to make an adjustment on the next kick. And that's what he does. I mean, we've often seen it. I mean, Harrison Butker has missed some kicks from time to time. Not many. I mean, he's still one of the most accurate kickers in the league statistically. But when the game's on the line, there's just like Mahomes. I mean, there's ice water in his veins, and I haven't seen him miss a big kick like that yet.
Matt, I'm sure Mark game pick, but given the dip with the Broncos appointing a new head coach and all the talk about the Raiders, the Chiefs have been sitting atop the AFC West for 6 years, I think, which is the longest stretch as a winner, I think, that's existed in the division. Broncos have won 5 previously. Other teams have done that, but the Chiefs have been dominant for so long. I know you're focusing on this weekend and this season, but do you think there might, like, looking around with your Chiefs hat on, I'm just interested, do you think it's a smart move that the Broncos have made? If Josh McDaniels was to come into the Raiders, do you see them being more competitive? Just your thoughts on the AFC West.
Yeah, I think Nathaniel Hackett in Denver could be a really good hire. He grew up for a little bit in Kansas City, so he's very familiar with, obviously, the rivalry. His dad was a very good offensive coordinator and a very good offensive coach, and obviously I think Nathaniel has really proven himself. If he is the prelude to Aaron Rodgers going to Denver, which a lot of people are connecting those dots right now, that would just make the AFC West even crazier. I mean, you could get into if you told me that Derek Carr was going to be by far the 4th best quarterback in the AFC West and it wasn't going to be a battle, I mean, that speaks a lot right there, because I mean, Derek Carr, he deserves a lot more credit than he probably gets for the numbers that he puts up. Josh McDaniels, I don't know. I wasn't terribly impressed the last time around, and the Patriot way doesn't always work out other places. It does in some, but not everywhere. Not sure how that would work out in Vegas and with the Raiders. So if they had to who they end up with, I get a sense that that's probably not who they wished that they were getting. I think that there were some bigger names that their fans were really hoping for. But hey, I think it just goes to show you that everybody in the AFC West realizes what they're up to and the challenge that they're up to, and that they've got to think a little bit differently, and and that they probably have to think offense if they want to catch up with Kansas City.
Well, we look forward to those potential scenarios next year. I mean, who knows? Yeah, Aaron Rodgers could be scapegoating his teammates in the AFC instead of the NFC for a change, which will make a nice difference. Matt, I was just thinking, we've actually been lucky to have quite a few Chiefs past and present on the show in the last while. We've had Lawrence Tynes, Scott Pioli, we had Brendan Daly earlier in the season. I kind of, at the time, it was when the defense wasn't performing. It was like, well, he's pretty laid back and relaxed, and maybe it's going to work out, as it always tends to do in the Chiefs season. But I always bring to mind, especially the way the Chiefs season worked, the expression from Hemingway, or the line from Hemingway, the night is always darkest before the dawn. And if anyone that applies to more than anything, I would say it's not necessarily the Chiefs, it's the Bengals. I mean, let's face it, they've had 31 years of darkness before this year's playoffs. I'm going to ask you a twofold question. Number one is about your pick for the game. But before we get to the pick, make the case, play poacher turn gamekeeper, make the case for the Bengals, why they can break the dawn and they can defeat what seems to be an indomitable opponent this weekend.
I kind of asked that same question in kind of a different way to Zach Taylor earlier today. It was basically, that this is such a young team that he has and an inexperienced team. Could that be a benefit going up against the Chiefs that have such tremendous experience that maybe the Bengals don't know enough to be afraid and be intimidated by the Chiefs because of the way that they have just kind of snuck in here and gotten on this run? There hasn't been a whole lot of time to build up. And so maybe, maybe there's a little bit to the fact that they're on a big stage, but they get there so quickly that they don't have time to be afraid or be scared. And, and Zach pointed out, and I think rightfully so, that, hey, he's got some big time playoff experience. They've brought in some veterans who's had some big time playoff experience, that they purposely brought in guys like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase that have big time college postseason experience and championship experience. So I don't think that the bright lights are going to scare the Bengals. And that's, I think, the big part of it, is that you just can't come into Arrowhead and be intimidated. You've got to be able to come in and play immediately. And I think that, whether it is that past experience or, like I said, whether it's just that they're inexperienced enough not to be afraid, that could be a big factor. I mean, if they're not intimidated on Sunday and they can come in and don't make mistakes, I think you're still going to have to force the Chiefs to make mistakes. If Patrick Mahomes doesn't turn over the football, if the Chiefs don't commit some penalties, I don't know how you can beat them. I mean, I think that they've shown that when they play their A+ game, I don't think that your A+ game can keep up. You probably have to make sure that the Chiefs play, below their expectations. So, I mean, the Bengals could play a perfect game and pull off the win. I think they would need some help to do that. But I think they're equipped to come in and give the Chiefs a fight. I mean, I don't think this is going to be a rollover at all. I mean, I think they're more than prepared to come in here and make this a good game.
Matt, we've really appreciated speaking to you both in the last few weeks and tonight ahead of the AFC Championship. Who knows? Maybe we could be saying hello in Los Angeles in a few weeks. I don't know what's going on, but fantastic to speak to you again. At Matt Derrick, that's with 2 R's, DERRICK on Twitter. Matt, thank you so much for coming on, man. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and speak to you soon.
I appreciate it. I wish the best of all. I got a great response from the last time I joined you guys, so it's a blast. I'll be glad to do it again. Take care.
So enjoy that, folks, if you're in Central Europe. However, we're delighted to welcome in our next guest this evening. We're delighted to welcome in Jake Ellenbogen to the show. Jake, a pleasure to talk some Rams. There's a lot of Rams fans here, and not just in Ireland, but in the UK as well. And so it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. And I love to hear that because, I've heard of, some Rams fans in the UK. They follow me on Twitter. I have a few that follow me that I know of from Ireland, but it's always nice to hear that, they have more of a presence. It seems that way, like with everything going on in LA and trying to get, people in the seats. It's like I keep trying to explain to people the Rams fan base is pretty big, actually. It's just scattered, it's all over the place. You'd be surprised. I mean, we kind of took over a bar here in upstate New York at one point for all the games. So Rams fans are everywhere.
And obviously, you're from downtown Rams as well. I should have mentioned that at the start. Do you maybe just want to tell our followers maybe just a small bit about that before we start?
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel that I do, Jake Ellenbogen channel. I have the Downtown Rams podcast I do with Alexis Kraft. It is a branch of my company, Downtown Sports Network LLC. And, basically we just cover the Rams. We cover the NFL draft. We get, former Rams players. We've had Kurt Warner, Isaac Bruce, and we've had Dick Vermeil on there. But we've also had George Kittle, who's going to be playing in this game. We get a bunch of prospects on there. So we like, really getting to know prospects before they become NFL players. And there's been some great players. I mean, a guy that just caught a touchdown, Nicky Allegretti, he was on our show. The big touchdown there. And then, another guy, Deontay Johnson, who was also in the postseason for the Steelers. So, we pretty much just try to keep it fresh and a little bit different than other Rams podcasts. Alexis is a phenomenal co-host, and honestly, one of the best that you could have. And that's pretty much it. We have a site, downtownrams.com, and I also write sports betting for NFL, NHL, and NBA over at The Game Day.
Yeah, we had Alexis on with us, I think, during the regular season, so that was great. And obviously, here we are in the championship game against the 49ers, who, have had the Rams number in the last, I think, is it 6 games, and obviously twice earlier this season. But we're coming into, Von Miller is kind of rediscovered his 2015 form. And you've got, I think today you have the team saying they want to do it for Aaron Donald's legacy. Talk to us, I suppose, a little bit about the feeling on this one, Jake, going into a championship game, but against a familiar opponent. What's the feeling amongst Rams fans?
The feeling is that, third time's a charm. The feeling is that, the second game they outplayed them. Obviously down the stretch, they kind of blew it. And, they didn't want it as much as the Niners did, because quite honestly, they didn't need it as much as the Niners did. The Niners were playing for their playoff lives, and the Rams were already clinched. So you could argue that they kind of, let things go down the stretch, as Sean McVay just playing kind of, way too safe, very much, kind of close to prevent defense at the end with Raheem Morris, but Sean McVay running 3 straight times to punt the ball back. I remember, Von Miller gets that sack on Jimmy Garoppolo under 2 minutes to go. They have a 0.4 chance, 0.4% chance of winning that game at that point. So a lot had to go wrong. And I think it was almost a blessing in disguise, because, like, for instance, the Buccaneers, they haven't been able to win 5 straight all season long. They would have had to win 5 straight in order to beat the Rams. They couldn't do it. The Rams, they went on a 5-game winning streak. They looked really good. But the thing is, they would have had to win 9 straight in order to win a Super Bowl. It's almost better getting that loss out of the way. You learn a little bit more in your losses than you do in your wins, and actually a lot more. And when you have a young coach in Sean McVay, I think people forget, youngest coach in the NFL. To this point, Bill Belichick wasn't a head coach until age 38. So, he's still learning. He's so far ahead of the curve. He has a guy that has a chance in Zach Taylor, part of his coaching tree to actually be in the Super Bowl against him. But, not getting ahead of ourselves there. Just, really impressed with Sean McVay's ability to kind of adapt. It didn't work out. You went with the really safe approach, and they didn't do it against Tampa. They could have sat on the ball. They could have just, tried their best, obviously in overtime to win the game. And they were like, nope, we're going to win the game. And that's what they did, with Matthew Stafford on those 2 throws. They get Kupp open, he gets a guy to slip. And that's what happens. Sometimes, those crazy, he slipped moments. I mean, give them credit. They actually ran a play, and that's sometimes what can happen. I mean, obviously bad things can happen, but if you play as if you're scared, it's like, leaving your house. I mean, danger's everywhere, but if you never leave your house, you'll never know what's out there. It's kind of the same thing, when you're playing that style of game. If they don't give Matthew Stafford a chance to go in the pocket, throw that pass to Cooper Kupp, and then the second pass that ultimately ends up sealing the deal, then, I mean, we don't know what would have happened. So, I feel really good about where they're at. I feel good about the defense, the momentum that they've gained. And to be honest with you, I mean, the game would have been an absolute blowout if they didn't have 4 uncanny turnovers. I mean, you talk about the bad snap, very rare fumble, weird fumble at the 1-yard line after, Tom Brady threw it right back to the Rams. They put them right in that territory. And then talk about an uncharacteristic fumble from Cooper Kupp. So, they don't fumble very often, and fumbling 4 times is just almost unheard of. And fumbling 4 times and not getting any of those, I mean, the math would give you at least half of those back. They didn't get any of those recovered. You're just not going to play games like that. So, I've seen, Niners fans out there kind of banking on this idea that they have ball security issues. It was really just that one game. I don't expect that to carry on.
Jake, that won't carry on, but I mean, like, the Rams are a team full of superstars. I seem to remember that Clark Kent turns into Superman, but Clark Kent and Superman had a weakness. It was green kryptonite would suck his powers away. And I don't want to say that a large first half lead is the Rams' kryptonite, but 2 out of the last 3 games, it certainly hasn't been good for the heart rates of yourself and Rams fans generally, I'm sure. Are you going to feel, if they're up comfortably at halftime, is there any Rams fan around the world that's going to feel like this is okay, we've got this, or are they going to be looking back with not so fond memories of the experiences in recent times?
Well, great question. I think when you look at how big the game is, right? And you can't get too high and mighty. There's no need to get too high and mighty. It's like just wait until the game ends. I was sitting there 27-3 watching with my family. I'm like, I'm not, there's no way I'm going to say that this game's over. This game is far from over. But, I think you have more of an argument with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. I think with Tom Brady, just what he's done throughout his career, obviously you need some luck to win all those Super Bowls. You need balls to bounce your way and things like that. But you got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, he's been able to be that clutch guy. And you saw that big throw to Mike Evans. That's a throw that Garoppolo has shown he can't make. So, when it comes down to it, when you're going up against a quarterback like Brady, that it's no lead is safe in this league, but it's definitely not safe when you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, Brady, Stafford, Rodgers. And, I think that's the big thing for last week. But this week, I do feel like it's different. If the Rams go up to, say that it's 27-3 this week, the game's over. I mean, the Rams really, unless they fumble 4 times again and they don't recover any of them, the game is absolutely over, because now Garoppolo is forced to go into a situation where he's not comfortable. Kyle Shanahan, who called a run play on 3rd and 7 to win the game or punt the ball back to Aaron Rodgers, isn't comfortable with them. And that's how you're going to win. Basically, you get him to make mistakes. It's a blueprint, but also just don't allow him to be part of just like, here's the thing is the Niners are 9-2 with him and 3-0 in the postseason when he doesn't throw a touchdown. Now you can look at that as kind of weird, but it actually makes a lot of sense, because it shows that when he is not the focal point of the offense or any point of the offense, they're just running the ball with Eli Mitchell, or, in some cases it would be Mostert, he's out, or Deebo Samuel. I mean, when they're doing that and they're able to have success with that, you can't stop them. Then they don't need to use Garoppolo. He'll throw 7 times like he did in the Super. You know what I mean? Like, so that's what it comes down to. And, as long as the Rams take him out of that, kind of that run that they want to do. I mean, obviously Kyle Shanahan doesn't want Garoppolo throwing 30, 40 times. If they have him throwing 30, 40 times, the Rams are going to win this game big. And I honestly would wonder if Trey Lance would come into this game at that point.
We are, days away now from this NFC Championship game. It's for a neutral. It's great to see Matthew Stafford in this game. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. But we'll try and get one more round in here, just very quickly, Jake. For me, Cam Akers. Now, I know this is like oh my god, the question of the week. Everyone's talking about this. What's your trust like as both a fan and an analyst on this? Because he obviously had a couple of issues last week. Would you feel confident giving him the ball on Sunday?
Yeah, so it's really interesting with Cam. He's not like Todd Gurley. And I saw a lot of people trying to compare the two. I mean, they're not physically at all. And Todd Gurley ran in the 4.4, so he's faster too. I mean, I think Cam ran 4.49 to 4.5, but that's not the point. The point is Todd had a nose for the end zone. He in his worst year with the Rams in 2019 had 12 touchdowns. This guy had a nose for the end zone. But with Cam Akers, the biggest issue with him is not even ball security. It's goal line efficiency. I think you could make the argument Darrell Henderson is better in goal line situations than Cam Akers, and so is Sony Michel. Darrell Henderson could be back, so I think that might change. They might be able to mix things up a little bit, use him in a way. I was at the Giants game, the way they used him on that wheel route, back pylon to the left side, the end zone. Over Tay Crowder. I mean, I think you can do that. You can take advantage of, maybe you get Fred Warner and you isolate him one-on-one. You take him out of the way by using Darrell Henderson. It opens up the middle of the field for a shallow cross for Cooper Kupp or, a Van Jefferson or, even, an Odell, or maybe even Tyler Higbee to run a seam buster, up the middle. I just think there's so many different things that they can do. And they just have a myriad of talent in the running back room. It's why I don't really understand why Rams fans are so focused on Sony Michel getting his carries when they got 3 guys that can do it very well. All 3 of them benched the same, by the way. So there's not one guy that's super, is not way stronger than the other. To keep in mind, Sony Michel 5-6 years ago at the combine, but still, they're all very strong and they're all, good in pass pro. I think Henderson and Michelle are better in pass protection than Cam Akers, but Akers is just a phenomenal receiver. And if they can't run the ball, then they will use him as a receiver and just call that running the ball at that point, like they did last week against Tampa. I mean, just being able to have a guy like that, people forget. I mean, the engine of the offense was entirely Todd Gurley. He made things so easy for Goff in 2017 and 18, but a big factor in that was the slip screens and the fact that Todd learned how to become a legit receiver, not out of the backfield, but also, they'd use him as a big slot receiver and things like that. He's 6'1", so I think that is something that the Rams are going to try to deploy in this one. I also want to see some, use some, not bubble screens, but, get some, you want like jet motion going on, because they've been using that, but they're not like handing it off. They did it last week. One time went for 15 yards. I say you have Brandon Powell, who, already might be the best returner in football. He's been on the Rams for 5 weeks, already has a touchdown. I'd say use him, get him involved. The guy can really set up his blocks, and Reid very well. He's a great ball carrier. And so, I think you use him a little bit, use Van Jefferson, and you just, any bit of time that you can get these guys leaning one way and hit them the other, that's how you have to do it. So if you can get a Fred Warner, who is just absolutely insane as a player, or you can get an Azeez Al-Shaair, underrated, or you can get Dre Greenlaw. These guys are all really fast to the ball. All, I'd argue they're all sideline to sideline linebackers. If you can get that advantage by having them lean one way and hitting them the other, that's what I'd be doing. So, I definitely think that's a realm of possibility that they could go. I'm not saying they'll use Powell. That's probably too much of a pipe dream for me. But, I think that they'll use, Van Jefferson over the top. And, at the end of the day, I think the Rams have all the weapons in place where, as long as the defense, hopefully with Sebastian Joseph Day back to help the run defense, as long as the defense stops the run, I mean, this game is going to be in control the rest of the way. The 49ers aren't one-dimensional because they're great on special teams. The Rams are all of a sudden great on special teams. They've become great on defense. They have a great offensive line, but they kind of almost become one-dimensional if you take away that run, because, I mean, you have to have Garoppolo to beat you with his arm. And I think any team in the league would be okay with that. If they lost, with Garoppolo in his arm, then he probably had the career game that everyone's been waiting for, but that's kind of the key to victory in this one. You got to force Garoppolo to throw it, stop the run, and you have a myriad of weapons. I would expect Matthew Stafford to have plenty of weapons to be able to win this game.
Yeah, obviously the Rams have a bevy of weapons, and we've talked a little bit about the Rams superstars on defense, but the 49ers aren't too shabby either. You got Nick Bosa, and for me, you got, one of the more underrated, he didn't make all pro in Fred Warner, who comes back off a serious injury last week, and is just absolutely lights out against the Packers. And he's the real leader. I mean, he reminds me a little bit of what Hightower used to do for the Patriots in terms of seeing the play before it's made, calling it. I suppose just in terms of, if the 49ers are to do it again, they're going to need to lean heavily on their defense to stop that Rams, and the weapons that we've talked about. Just from a Rams perspective, are there concerns about Bosa and about Warner being able to turn the screw and disrupt and kind of take over the games in the way, maybe in a different way to say Aaron Donald, but to take over?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Nick Bosa's ability to convert speed to power is just, it's one of the best in the NFL. So you have to always worry about him coming off the edge, especially against Rob Havenstein or wherever he wants to line up. Havenstein's not great against the speed rushers. Bosa's more of a power guy, but he's got a fair amount of speed, and they do a great job in the interior. They develop a lot of pressure, and that's really been, kind of a staple, I think, in the playoffs, is teams that are, able to attack the interior and, get that interior pressure, not allowing quarterbacks to really step into the throws, step up in the pocket, clear out space, have to go side to side. You're just complementing it. So if you're forcing a Dak Prescott, now he can't step up. he has to sidestep, and now he's walking into a Nick Bosa. You're setting everything up, and that's what they mean when, what Donald doesn't always go on the stat sheet. It's the same thing with anybody, those pressures, Von Miller, exactly. But with the 49ers, they have DJ Jones playing out of his mind right now in the interior. They have Armstead, with Bosa and everything. So I am concerned about that, because if we see the same offensive line production that we saw in the second half in week 18, the whole game, it's going to be a nightmare for Stafford, to be honest with you. I mean, they'll make adjustments and they'll probably figure it out. But Brian Allen, I think was coming a little bit off his knee injury. I don't think he was 100%, and I do think that's why they exploited that so well. But I mean, we saw it against, the Titans and Bengals. I mean, look at what, Burrow got the win. The Bengals won, but I mean, Danico Autry and Jeffrey Simmons, what they were able to do, crashing through the middle. And then anytime Burrow tried to get out of it, you had to worry about a Harold Landry coming off the edge. I mean, that's incredibly difficult to maneuver around. And so you have Stafford, who isn't as mobile as a Burrow or as a Mahomes, and now you're bringing the heat like that. That's definitely something to keep in mind. I mean, I personally, the 49ers need to watch the game and, from last week and be like, we're not doing that. Because if you blitz Stafford, you're just asking for it. He can get rid of the ball quickly. There was that one, viral video that came out about Cooper Kupp, the replacement fire zone, where you have the nickel coming, dropping down. And then you have, the two safeties up top, or the three safeties up top, and, one pushing through. And so that he found the soft spot in that little zone pocket, in the seam. And it's basically a matter of, can your nickel get there before my quarterback sees that, recognizes it, and hits the trigger? And so I feel like, obviously Stafford can. And so, for that reason, if they try things like that, if they, try a fire zone, things like that, then I do think Stafford will pick them apart. I mean, that's what he's been doing. But if they're able to get there with 3 or 4 man rushes, all game, and they don't blitz, that would be a problem. I mean, Stafford would really, McVay would have to really dig into some tricks. You're talking about maybe some trick plays that they ran against the Rams the last time. You saw Debo throwing a touchdown. You might have to have Akers, a former high school quarterback, throw, or, Cooper Kupp or Odell. I mean, they might have to dig into that bag of tricks to get something going, because if they're getting, 4, men, rushing, and they're not actually blitzing and they're getting pressure, it's putting Stafford an incredible amount of, trouble. And I mean, he's got the weapons, sure, but you got to, if you don't have enough time to throw, it doesn't matter. If these plays, they take a while to develop. So, they can make adjustments, but it's not going to be easy if they do get that going.
Jake, Odell's thrown for a couple of touchdowns in his career already. So, yeah, maybe that gets broken up. And I love you bringing up Joe Burrow there, because, I think we should give more credit to Joe Burrow's contribution to car safety with his audition last week as a crash test dummy.
Absolutely.
To ensure these things. Jake, I know this has been said many times, and I can't remember the first time I heard it. I'm going to give credit to Paul Zimmerman, the late, great sports writer of Sports Illustrated, but he alluded, and many people have alluded to the fact, American football really is a bit of a weird game, because 90% of the action, 90% of the work that's done is done away from the ball. Like, the ball, to an extent, is irrelevant. It's about the routes people run. It's about the blocks people play. It's about the scheme that's designed. And the actual passing of the ball, the running of the ball is, about 10% of the actual work going on. And very often as fans, as commentators, as reviewers of this, we can pass over all the hard work in the lines and the hogs in relation to it. But sometimes it's because, well, the Flash Harrys are the ones that tend to draw our attention and our eyes. So with all of that being said, Cooper Kupp definitely should be Offensive Player of the Year and has an amazing season. But the lightning rod probably for the Los Angeles Rams, good, bad, or indifferent, is Matthew Stafford. And thinking even last week, that could have gone very differently. He, for some reason, decided to scramble, fumbled the ball. Luckily, it came back to him. And you and the Rams fans have seen good Matt and bad Matt plenty of times this season already. Going into the most important game of the Rams season, the most important game for the Rams in the last 5 years, obviously, since your last Super Bowl run, how do you feel the Rams feel generally about which Matthew will turn up?
I think it's going to be the one we've been seeing in the postseason. You know, he's on a mission. This is the most important game of his career, just like last week was the most important game of his career and the one before that. But, you know, he has had to retrain himself to not, you know, make that hero ball move that he had to make in Detroit. When they were down 7, 14, 21, 24, whatever, I mean, this guy leads the league in fourth quarter comebacks since he entered the league in 2009. I mean, it is incredible what he's done. And it's almost hard to believe he's won that many games because he was in Detroit. But, you know, it's just a credit to what he is. And, you know, this is why I never looked at the 0-3 playoff record and was worried, because there's context that needs to be had here. The first game, you know, against the Saints, I mean, the Sean Payton era, that was probably the best Saints team they had. And they scored 45 points. He put up 4 touchdowns in his first ever playoff game. This wasn't playoff Romo. This is somebody that showed you he can play in the moment. He's ready for the moment. That's why I never agree with the whole, you know, oh, Stafford can't play, you know, he can't, you know, work in the big game. I mean, what is the big game if, you know, down in the fourth quarter, you're not throwing touchdown, or you're only throwing touchdowns, you're not throwing interceptions. You have the highest passer rating in the league in the second half of anybody. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, anybody. So I just don't know what that means. I mean, he throws picks. So did Brett Favre. Brett Favre, you know, won a Super Bowl. I mean, I just look at it as if it's been unfair criticism, and it's been the fact that, you know, too many people watched Thanksgiving games and were just like, oh, that's Stafford. That's just Stafford. You know, they remember, oh, he's fun to watch until, you know, they're used to him throwing those picks in the fourth quarter because, quite frankly, he had to try to make something happen in a game that probably wasn't a game after half. So now you have it. Stafford realizes I have the defense playing as well as it is right now. Raheem Morris tightened that thing up right after the Packers loss. I have the offense playing well. The run game is starting to come alive a little bit. I mean, they've been 24th all year in the league, you know, so what he's done has been incredible. But I have Odell now, who somewhat understands the playbook. I would imagine he understands it a lot now. You have Van Jefferson, who had over 800 yards in his second season. You have Cooper Kupp, who has the most yards if you count postseason. He's the only one that ever had 2,000 receiving yards in a season, passing Larry Fitzgerald. So, you know, with Tyler Higbee, the way he's, you know, that chemistry has really started to evolve as the season went on. You just have to realize that you have everything at your disposal. You don't need to do anything crazy. You're in every game. When the Rams lose, they lose by a possession. They don't lose 31-10 like you saw in November. That was an anomaly. They lost Robert Woods on Friday. They found out that he was out for the season on Saturday, and then they had to play a game on Monday. He was a huge part of the game plan. And you just can't stress enough how much that impacted having to have Odell come in and actually play, you know, snaps, not even having a practice, not even knowing the playbook. And then, of course, you had Ben Skoranek, a 7th-round pick who started off the season on IR, was behind, was a special teamer. Now he's playing a legit role on the offense. It just, you know, it didn't work. It trickled down to the defense. There was no momentum. So then you see the second time, and they outplayed them. They should have won the game. They blew it. And so now you feel like this time around, Stafford in the postseason hasn't thrown a pick. I'm not worried about jinxing him because I've already said plenty of stuff that would have jinxed anybody at this point, and they wouldn't have gotten here. What it comes down to is this. I think Stafford is really, you know, he's bought into what he needs to buy into. He doesn't need to be the hero ball guy. You saw a little bit of it on that last play, but I mean, that's open. He's not throwing that if that's not open. He said that's a play that they run, you know, 100 times and he gets it 0 out of 100 times. It's the love of the game route. It's just basically you go out there and it creates separation and guys get open and there's more spacing. He was open. He beat his man. So Stafford threw it. To know that you have that equalizer though with the deep ball, and to know the way Stafford's playing and how, basically how confident he's looked the last 2 games, albeit against Arizona, who at one point we were talking about, are they going to win the Super Bowl? And then Tampa, who is the defending Super Bowl champions on the road. The way he's played in those last 2 games really tells me it's a good sign. The 49ers can make a lot of things happen. Don't get me wrong. Wouldn't be surprised if the defense forces a turnover, but I would be more surprised if it's on Stafford making a bad play over the 49ers making a good play. I think Stafford's played incredible to this point. Even if you calculate the interceptions, he doesn't have as many turnovers as Patrick Mahomes. And so in that regard, I would say the way Stafford's playing right now, I continue him to do that. I would imagine he continues to do that. And I see them in the Super Bowl playing Patrick Mahomes. And I mean, that would be talk about a Super Bowl with fireworks, for those that didn't like the 13-3 Super Bowl. There you have it, guys. I mean, that would be the Super Bowl that everybody thinks that, we all want Rodgers and Mahomes. I mean, who's to say Stafford and Mahomes wouldn't be as good,
It could be fun, Jake. I want to give you one point of caution and one bit of nervousness for Rams fans. There is another category that Matt Stafford leads in since he joined the league, and that is taking third down sacks to push his team out of field goal range and points win prizes.
I believe it. I'm a little surprised he's ahead of Josh Allen, seeing as the Colts only had a shot last year as the 7th seed because Josh Allen took a 20-yard sack that took him out of field goal range. But I digress. No, I just, I feel really good about this team. And, the way, at the end of the day, if the Rams play their game, then they're going to win. And if they have to result to play the Niners game, they could still win because they're the better team, more talented, but it puts them in more of a tougher position. And I'm going to go with the lines that they're at SoFi. It's this third game. You can literally erase the 0-6. I mean, no one is going to care that the Niners won 6 straight if you knock them out of the playoffs to go to the Super Bowl. This is the ultimate revenge game. I mean, the Niners knocked them out of the playoffs in 2019. Sean McVay is chomping at the bit for this. He's got 2 things. He can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by winning the next 2 games. He can win a Super Bowl finally, and I guess to go with that, he can score more than 3 points in a Super Bowl. And number 2, he can knock off Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo, who he hasn't beaten.
Well, look, it's going to be an incredible few weeks. Hometown Rams, can they do it? Jake, at JK Bogan on Twitter, at Downtown Rams on Twitter as well. Jake, thanks so much for coming on. Who knows, maybe we might chat to you before a Super Bowl in LA with the Rams. But for now, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always down. Thank you guys so much.
Hi, Kajay Maratatu. Tommy Gamoy, Colin. Tommy Gamoy.
Come on, Buenos Dias.
Ryan, how are we?
I'm great. Looking forward to 2 really, really good games this weekend. I mean, you probably couldn't have asked for 2 better games. Team that we didn't expect to be here, and 2 teams in their own division on the NFC side. 2 great games ahead. And
we are live. Yes,
a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. We're live. As I said, sorry, I said it too early there. Mark isn't here. Mark's watching the late. I actually thought I had to get Brian away from the TV there as well. I know it's back with a crowd tonight, but no, look, it's gonna be good crack. We've got a massive weekend ahead of us here. 2 huge games, and Jeff Reinbold's coming on in a minute as well. Just before we start the show, the live segment of the show. Thanks for everyone who's watched so far. Matchbook, our sponsors, £20. 20 yo-yo welcome offer. Money back is cash if your first bet loses. We have got an anytime touchdown treble this weekend, which we'll talk about towards the end of the show. Enter the bonus code Irish NFL Show, and it's an absolute beezer. Jeff's coming on in a few minutes, but I want to introduce Colin, Kelly, Stafford, Cronin, and Brian. Do you know what? Actually, I had this whole thing in my head. And
Brian Dable O'Leary, because it's just come out in the last few minutes that he is in fact likely to be the new Giants head coach.
Colin, I was wondering how long would it take for a Giants reference, but do you know what? Our next guest is actually going to talk about some of these coaching changes because, we've been on here for an hour. We're talking about the championship, and obviously the championship's got huge relevance this weekend, but we've also got some coaching changes, so we'll try and mix and match with our guest. Delighted as we look ahead to both these games to bring in, if he's ready, if he wants to give us a thumbs up, see if he's ready. Is he? Yeah, he's laughing. He's okay. Jeffrey, how are we?
What's up, guys? What's up with my crew?
Friday night, it's almost turned into a ritual here, Jeff. At this point, it's.
I like it. I like. Colin, what do you got on? You got that Seattle Seahawk green on tonight.
Oh.
I think I'm nearly between my pale complexion, the hoodie, and the orange behind me. I think I'm a personification of the flag, Jeff.
I got you.
How's the form, Jeff? You good?
Okay. Before we go any further, I got to know who picks. Who's picks? Who's got who?
Oh no, hold on.
No.
We're doing that at the end of the show, but I want to call out my friend Shane because he did say this last weekend. I thought he actually just texted me, Jeff. He told me he picked every game right, but he was 3-1. So I'm not calling him out, Shane. But yeah, I'm not giving the picks yet, Jeff, for my picks. Maybe Brian wants to give his away. I don't know.
No, we gotta hold that, but we got.
When I'll put it like this. There's one team who are returning to the championship game for, I think it's the 4th year in a row.
Oh,
And they were my Super Bowl pick at the start of the year. So that's not really a massive team because a lot of people would have picked the Chiefs. So I think it's fair to say you know where my pick is going in the AFC side of things.
I think I can read your mail.
Jeff, I think it would be interesting to hear. The last week we've seen, a number of kind of head coaching positions filled. I think Brian has alluded to the Giants the news is leaking out that Brian Dable looks to be the candidate there. But I suppose two things. One, just if there's anyone who, springs out to you in particular, but from your experience, you've been in the game a long time, you've been coaching. What is it like for a coach at this time of year? Say Hackett with the Broncos, right? He last week, he's down in the doldrums. The Packers lose to the 49ers. Today, he's on top of the world as he's unveiled as the head coach of the Broncos. What is that transition like for coaches and players? They're coming and going after such kind of a tumultuous end to the season.
Well, it's a different deal because, the football and it's, obviously you move on into the All-Star games and the Senior Bowl and the draft and, all of that. But it's hard to describe, guys, just how sudden the end comes, right? Because you're in the office 14 to 16 hours a day, every day for 8 months, 10 months sometimes. And then all of a sudden, one day it's over. I mean, it's just over. And, you're worn out, you're physically tired, you're emotionally tired. There's always uncertainty. There's always, there's going to be changes. You make your contract may be up. It may not be up. It may not be renewed. I mean, there's just so much stuff that goes on. And then for guys that are going through the head coaching deal, like they have to be on point. And I mean on point, because you go into those head coaching interviews and sometimes those things will last a whole day long, right? The first one's usually a little more, I wouldn't say social, but it's certainly a process. But then the second one, maybe, you're in there an entire day and they're grinding on you and want to know about how you feel about this situation, this player, that player, how you'd handle the cap, who your assistant coaches are going. So you have to be incredibly prepared. So for a lot of those guys, and Hackett and Dable and Leslie Frazier and all, their agents have worked with them to put together packages for them to take into those meetings so that they really have a very good handle on what they want to do. But then once you get, once they anoint you, once you get chosen, then the real work starts, because everybody who you've ever worked with at any point in time is calling you and wanting to be on your staff. And it's this, I mean, it's really difficult to do, because one of the first things you have to learn how to do as a head coach is to say no, that you can't do this or you can't do that. And, that's a difficult deal. So I don't envy those guys at all. Right. I envy what they make, but I don't envy, what they have to do on a daily basis right now. And, so much of it is out of your control too. So for example, Denver goes offensive guy after a defensive guy, and they go an offensive guy with a history with one of the better quarterbacks in the league who might be available. Right. Well, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to get Aaron Rodgers, but that puts the pressure on you that if he does in fact shop around, that you're going to have to close that deal, because that's what the fan base wants. And I'm certain that's what part of the reason why you got that job. Brian Dable, you know, in New York, you saw what Mr. Maris said the other day about Jones. You know, the Daniel Jones. He said, you know, we spent 4 years trying to screw the kid up. So now he's going to be looked at because of the work he did with Josh Allen. He's going to be looked at as this guy that's got to fix Daniel Jones. The same thing would be true if he went to Miami. You're the guy that has a relationship with Tua. You can get the best out of Tua. So each of them has kind of like a different, different challenge that they take on in the organization. You know, for Hackett, he's got to prove that they can score points. They want his offense. They want that, you know, that dynamic offense that he had in Green Bay. Problem is, he doesn't have, you know, he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers. You know, he's got Drew Lock, and they're not even in the same area code. So it's going to be interesting.
Jeff, I was thinking more about the general manager situation this week. Obviously, my team has taken on Joe Shane, who's come from Buffalo, but I felt not so much because of the Giants, but he had to step away from the role in which he's created for himself in Buffalo, being assistant general manager to Brendan Behan last week. Obviously, because he's been successful in his own aspirations in terms of his own career, and he's obviously straight away immediately moved into the new role with the Giants. How difficult is that for a general manager? Bear in mind, he's been involved in that team for so long, and obviously Buffalo's game on Sunday was a heartbreaking loss for him. And yeah, he had to step away from that game, essentially step away from his role with that team because he's moving on to something different. So
yeah, quickly. I mean, you have to make an emotional break right now, right? You can't. You got to understand that now you're a New York Giant, and you know your loyalty and your attention and focus and everything has to go to your job with the Giants. And that doesn't mean you can't have friends with the Bills, you can't, you know, organization, or you can't, you know. But the reality of it is your job demands that you are 100% in with the Giants. And that's a big job, because if the head coach's job is big, the general manager's job is even bigger, because he's responsible for all things, right? Next to the president. He's responsible for the salary cap. He's responsible for the personnel. He's responsible for the draft. He's responsible for scouting. He's responsible for coaching. He's responsible for the medical people, the film guys, everybody in those organizations. So, you know, you're looking at those guys will have a staff probably of over 100 guys when you add coaches and all of it up together. And that's a big number of people to all get on the same page and get them all pulling in the right direction. And everybody, you know, you got to, first thing you got to do is clearly define everybody's role and everybody's expectation in the organization. That's a chore. I mean, that is a chore, because if it's not clearly defined, then it can't be done well.
Jeff, he said the enormity of the role he got very quickly when he stood up on the podium at the opening press conference, because he said it was nothing like he'd ever seen in Buffalo in terms of the media and everything that comes with that, being in New York.
Well, New York is the toughest media town in America. There are more newspapers in New York than there are any place else. And, you know, it's a divided town in that it's Giants and it's Jets. And, you know, it's historically, the Giants have been, that's the traditional New York team. The Jets are kind of an upstart. They're more of a, you know, Long Island, New Jersey team, right? But the Giants are New York City, right? That's, you know, years and years and years of tradition. You walk into that building and it's amazing. You walk into the building, and in the foyer, the first thing to your left you see are all the Lombardi trophies, right? And the National Football League championship trophies. And you go back to the days of like Frank Gifford, and, you know, I mean, it's amazing. It is amazing. Like, I've been in a lot of NFL facilities, but that one, the Giants, it was like, wow, you really got a sense of tradition when you walked into that place.
And Jeff, just before we look at the matchups this weekend, obviously Sean Payton walking away from the Saints this week. You told me last night you wanted to obviously share maybe a fun story on him. But first off, it's the end of an era in New Orleans, and he's come on this week on media saying that he wants to focus on TV. Do you think he's sitting back waiting for that Dallas job? And also, you got to get him in Sky Sports this weekend and Thomas Morstead and have like a trifecta with Cameron Jordan.
Well, Thomas is in town, and he's here with his daughters, and it was really. This is indication how bad my eyes are. He tweeted out something that there are a lot of coffee shops in London, and he wanted, but I couldn't read who it was whose tweet it was, right? So I really didn't pay any attention to it until I got back to the apartment, got back to the hotel, and I got a better look at it, and I was like, oh, Thomas is in town. So we're going to get together. His mom and dad moved here. They're from England originally, and they moved back. And then we're going to get together when he's got the girls with him. His wife and his son are still back in the States. So we'll get together and we'll get an episode of Coffee with a Coach. You guys ought to get him on your show. I know you do a great job. But Sean Payton, I think it was 1985. And I'm on a visit to San Diego State University to talk football with their coaches. And we go out to dinner, and then we go back to the facility, and we're going to watch some film. And there was a young coach there that was drawing plays on the back of his pizza box, right? He had ordered out for pizza, I guess, or something. And he was drawing plays on the back of his pizza box, and was really a nice kid, really a nice guy. And he wasn't much younger than me, and really sharp, like really, really sharp. You could tell he was one of the ones that, like, this kid was going to go far. And it was Sean Payton. And the next time I see him, he's on the sidelines with the Saints. And I thought to myself, man, isn't that crazy? Because he had played amateur football in England, right? And then he had gone and was a scab player for the Bears, and he had gone to the CFL, and he never could latch onto a team as a player in pro football. But he was so well thought of because he was so smart and so sharp that it was obvious that he was going to be a star in coaching somehow, right? Or at some time. And I can remember going into the Sugar Bowl in 2007, and we used the Saints facility, right? And we practiced right after they got off the field. And so I had a chance to talk to him there for a few minutes, and it was amazing how he had become this icon in New Orleans. And I mean, guys, he has no Louisiana background. He really has no Southern background at all. But he went into New Orleans right after Katrina. And because of what he did with the Saints, he gave that city hope, right? He gave that city something that they could believe in, something that could rally them up from the most devastating natural, disaster that Southern Louisiana's ever known. And this was I think Katrina hit in 2006, and we went in there to play in January of 2008, and some of the city was still, it looked like a war zone, right? And he had done such an amazing job of galvanizing that whole community. Think about this. Except for a few years with Jim Mora, the Saints have been garbage forever, right? They were the first ones to wear the bags over their head. They called them the Aints and all of that. And he came, and all of a sudden, it all changed. It all changed. It was fun to go to a Saints game again. It was fun to be a Saints fan. And I think that whole region will always really hold him in the highest esteem.
Jeff, I suppose, talking about kind of legendary coaches, we're going to see Andy Reid on Sunday night. And what a job he's done with the Chiefs. Hasn't had a losing season. They're hosting their 4th AFC Championship game. Obviously, he had 100 wins with the Eagles. Then he arrived in Kansas and he's taken it to a new level again. The Bills seem to throw everything they had at the Chiefs. The Chiefs find a way to win, and then Andy steps up to the podium and he says, when things are grim, you got to be the Grim Reaper. Talk to us about Andy Reid and his impact in Kansas.
Well, think about this, guys. All the stuff you said, Colm, is exactly correct. He was never a coordinator in the NFL before he got a head job. Never, right? And so now we say you have to have been a coordinator and have success and all this stuff. If you're a great football coach, it doesn't matter. He's a great communicator. The players love him. You can see that on the sidelines. They absolutely love him. He's a guy that believes in second chances. You know, frankly, they've had some of them blow up in their face too, but he's given second chances to players and gave them an opportunity to continue to play the game after they may have made a mistake or two or whatever. I think his players appreciate that about him. He's gone through incredible struggles in his own personal life. You know, he lost a son who was actually at training camp. He was a strength coach for the Chiefs and succumbed to a drug overdose in training camp. And then he had the other son got involved in a DUI situation that took the life of a person. And so he's struggled. He's a human being. I mean, he's not afraid to show that to his players. And so I think that's one of the reasons why he's so successful. Plus the fact he's an absolute film junkie. I mean, he loves football. He loves to watch tape. He's always the Chiefs every year go out and they get all kinds of college film, high school film, CFL film, any kind of film they can where somebody's doing something different, because he wants to see what the cutting edge is all the time. He's not a guy that just sits back and says, well, I run the West Coast offense and that's what we're going to be, right? He's always looking for a new wrinkle. That's one of the reasons why they're so dynamic in the red zone. I mean, their touchdown percentage in the red zone is unbelievable. And a lot of it is because of the imagination that he shows down there. So you go and take Philadelphia 4 straight years to the NFC Championship, and then turn around and take Kansas City 4 straight years to the AFC Championship. That sounds like a Hall of Fame resume to me, right? I mean, I don't know, other than win a couple more Super Bowls, I don't know what more he could do to solidify himself as a Hall of Famer.
Jeff, we've seen in the past where a team that plays each other, 2 teams play each other week 17 as it was then, and then they end up playing each other the following week as a wild card because of the circumstances. It's not quite like that this time around. They did play each other in week 18. It's 3 weeks on. Do you think there's any significance in the fact that they played each other so recently, the Rams and the 49ers?
Yeah, I think there is. You know, we go through that a bunch in the CFL where we have what we call back-to-backs. And so what you find out about that is that guys that make a mistake in those situations, in my experience, have been guys that completely change what they do the second time that they play, right? Because you are who you are and whatever you're good at. So, for example, in this game, if you're San Francisco, you got to run the ball. You got to know that your edge against the Rams is you have physically tougher than they are, right? Now, if you're the Rams, you got to come out and say, listen, we're gonna stack the box and we're gonna make their quarterback show us that he's good enough to beat us. That information is valid because you can, I just went through that game you're talking about, the week 18 game today, right? And what I saw was after the Rams got ahead 17-0, there were only just a couple subtle things that changed. So the 49ers started running more gap schemes than zone schemes on offense. They made sure that they got the ball in Deebo Samuel's hands. No matter how they did it, they got the ball in his hands, and he took over the game. But then defensively, they softened up a little bit, right? It was almost like they were trying to just get out of the game, and instead of fighting back, putting a foot on the accelerator and going after him. OBJ got 3 targets in the entire from when the game went to 17-0 till the end of the game. OBJ got 3 targets. Stafford threw one in the ground. He dropped one, and the last one was intercepted on the sideline. That's it. He disappeared for the whole game. I think, that's relative, because if you're an offensive analyst or on the offensive staff with the Rams, you got to make that note to yourself. We've got to keep OBJ in the game. We've got to get him touches. Even if we're ahead, we got to get him touches.
Jeff, just finally from us, you have a nice busy weekend. Next weekend, you're coming over to Dublin. Would you like to tell everyone what's going on next weekend?
Yeah, we're going to do and again, I appreciate you guys being such a big part of this. We're going to put on a 2 or 3 hour, clinic / I don't know what you would say. It's just, we're just going to talk ball for 3 hours one afternoon. It's for the coaches in Ireland. It's for the players in Ireland. We're going to talk about best practices, about, how to improve as an athlete, some drills that the coaches can take that will transfer no matter what scheme they use. Talk about, football and have a question and answer period, so that, again, what we're trying to do is promote the game in Ireland, and all the money that the ticket sales will go directly back to the Irish Federation to help football in Ireland. It might be to get kids equipment, to get balls, to pay referees. That's the Federation's choice. But we just wanted to reach out and help football in Ireland, because I think sometimes it can be a situation in the UK and in Great Britain that Ireland's just kind of out there, right? It's everything. Everybody thinks about the UK, and then but I know that there's a tremendous amount of rivalry between Irish and the English, but we all speak the same language, and we all speak the language of football, and that's what we're trying to help.
It's going to be good fun, Jeff, and hopefully we might see you next Saturday, Jeff. Who knows what's going to happen next Saturday?
I understand.
Definitely.
We might see each other next Saturday. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and let's see what happens, and we'll try and announce that in due course. There's been a few comments there, and I'd be amiss to say this before we let you go, Jeff. Fred Flunk has said, "What's the plan next Saturday? Is there pints after Jeff's gig or not?" He's asking because he has the option to head to London next Saturday morning to see his little one. Jeff, and Fred, Jeff's got a flight right after, so I don't if we go for pints, Jeff might not be back in London for TV for Super Bowl, but I'm sure we'll have good fun in Dublin.
He might not be back
for
having
a
week.
pint of Guinness next week. I know, but Jeff has openly stated his admiration for Guinness, so you're definitely
whoa! I said lager. I didn't say Guinness. Now
lager.
We ain't going there.
Jeff, you're very consistent, because the first time you came on the show many moons ago, you said, "I can't drink that Guinness stuff."
You're right, and I haven't learned out yet either.
Jeff, it's gonna be a hell of a weekend, and hopefully, I'm sure we'll do a coffee with Coach maybe on Monday and chat and have some crack as well. Just ahead of that, there. Enjoy the game on Sunday. I know you've got Cameron. Is Cameron Howes going on, and you got obviously Baldy on the Zoom. Neil, etc., and Sean. So it should be good crack. Enjoy both games on Sky Sports, and looking forward to chatting ball with you next weekend, Jeff. It's gonna be good fun.
All right, my brother. Take care, guys. Thank you.
See you next.
Thanks
See you next weekend, Jeff.
Have a nice weekend, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
And Jeff Reinbold, ladies and gentlemen. Jeffrey is on Sky Sports all weekend with all the guys. Bengals, Chiefs, 49ers, Rams. Thanks to Jeff for his continued support of the show. Couple of really appreciate it, Jeff, man. Thanks a million. That venue's TBC next Saturday. That should be announced as soon as possible, we hope. More on that as soon as possible. And yeah, just a reminder again, the Irish NFL show presented by Matchbook. The Matchbook bet this week, Brian, is anytime touchdown treble. And do you know what? Like, obviously, T's and C's, 18 plus gamble lower. It makes sense, surely. Cooper Kupp, who's the other two?
Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, and Travis Kelce in a treble that I think Matchbook have priced it up at an improved offer of 8-1, 7-1. But it's the best on the market if you're looking to have a bet. So you certainly should consider setting up a Matchbook account and taking advantage of that. And I believe if you go to our social page where we have promoted the bet itself, there's a link that brings you directly in to the bet, and it's very easy to go in and place that bet. So for me, it looks like if you don't want to get involved in backing the team to win the game or the over points, and you just want to enjoy potentially a lot of touchdowns, you have to consider those three guys to be certainly in the running to score a touchdown this weekend.
You happy enough with that, Colin? Have you anything to add to that? I know you're a big betting man.
I'm glad that it has been realized and that you sort all of this out beforehand. I'm not even involved in it because it just flies entirely over my head.
Obviously, thanks to the boys as well at Matchbook, Sully and stuff at Matchbook. It's going to be a good crack going to the Super Bowl now with the odds, obviously, going into the Super Bowl over the next few weeks. And talking about the Super Bowl, we've got a really cool announcement on Sunday during the halftime of the AFC Championship. You don't want to miss that. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be great. And that's all I'm going to leave it as. Colin, the comments came in when you were talking there. Somebody referred to you as, what was it again, Brian?
I saw Kermit the Frog. I saw mint chocolate ice cream. So
Aero Mint.
Aero Mint.
I thought. Have you seen Hooper, the Shamrock Rovers mascot? No, at any stage.
I've no idea who that is. I like Hooper. Hooper. Anyway, right. I mean, I'm going to put it out here now. I'm very confident. I'm not confident in all of these picks at all. I've been dreading this for a long time because I literally only made my decision 20 or 30 minutes ago. Genuinely, I'm telling everyone this now. Mark not here. We'll put out Mark's picks on the screens. Mark should be back, I think, on Monday night, going over the championship games. But Championship Sunday is upon us. The two games are the AFC Championship Bengals at the Chiefs at 8 p.m. on Sunday. The 49ers at the Rams in SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles, California, the home of the Super Bowl. 2 weekends away to California. Let's look at it, boys. Bengals Chiefs AFC Championship. The Chiefs coming off a absolutely incredible game last weekend from both teams. The Chiefs made it. The Chiefs are in the AFC Championship game. The Chiefs column are playing the Cincinnati Bengals. Who advances to SoFi Stadium and why?
Well, I think the first thing to say is this has the potential to be another brilliant game. These are two teams, obviously, who have met each other just a few weeks ago. And in that game, Jamar Chase had more receiving yards than Patrick Mahomes had passing yards, which is quite something. And Joe Burrow was 30 of 39, 446 yards, no interceptions, and a passer rating of 148. To say that Burrow and Chase were brilliant that day would be an understatement. They went really to the outside. If you look at what they did that day, they did not attack the middle of the field at all. They trusted Chase that he was going to have that he was going to win the contested catches. They put everything to the boundary, and he did. He won it, and he was fantastic. So it'll be interesting to see what the Chiefs do defensively to try to counter that. Do they put so much effort into taking Chase away that it opens somebody else up? Also, there is what do you do about Burrow, because if you blitz him, he's able to deal with that. The Chiefs probably have enough maybe not to do that, and given the Bengals O-line. But how do the Bengals keep him upright? Like, taking 9 sacks, obviously, and winning is a phenomenal achievement from Burrow and a testament to how good a QB is. But that's not sustainable. You cannot take 9 sacks every week. You won't win the games, and you won't have a very long career. So I wonder if we'll see some adjustments from the Bengals to try to get the ball out of Burrow's hands a little bit quicker. I think that will be interesting to see. For me, look, the Chiefs are hosting their 4th AFC Championship game. Their 4th. It's unprecedented. They've scored 42 points in each of their last 2 playoff games. They took everything that the Bills could throw at them, and they still found a way to win with 13 seconds remaining. It's not going to shock me if the Bengals win. I don't think there is a shock this weekend. But I'm going to say the Chiefs at home in Arrowhead with Patrick Mahomes playing like he has in the playoffs, where he seems to step it up a level. I would expect the Chiefs to win at home. But the Bengals have this generation's Joe Cool. Could he prove himself? Absolutely. But on the basis of probabilities, I'm going to go with the Chiefs.
That game a couple of weeks ago in Cincinnati, you referred to how well Chase played. He 286 yards off 11 receptions. And a large part of that was, give or take in the first half, I think he ran off a 75-yard touchdown. So I wouldn't say that the numbers were skewed in any way, but he had a really effective first half. But yeah, at halftime, they were still down by 11 points to the Chiefs. The Chiefs in the second half had struggles on offensive line. The left tackle Brown, who they traded with the Ravens, went out, and then they brought in the second string, and he also went out. And from that point on in the game, Mahomes struggled. Last offseason, very soon after the Super Bowl, we were having a big discussion around the Chiefs and how they could be effective this season. And Michael, in fairness, called out the fact that Mahomes in the Super Bowl struggled because that offensive line was non-existent and they had so many injuries going into the game. And a lot of those players, they were out of contract and they weren't going to be kept on. And would they be in a position to come back so strongly this year with a brand new offensive line? Well, if you look at the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season, we talked about how poor the defense was. But if you look at the stats and how well the offensive line was playing, where Mahomes was throwing 2 or 3 interceptions a game, they were struggling. But something went clicked at some stages and it's gone off, and that offensive line has come together very well. And I look at that offensive line on Sunday as opposed to the other offensive line, which Collins alluded to gave away 9 sacks last weekend. A couple of weeks ago when I picked the Raiders, I felt that the Raiders would get them, and they did for large parts of the game. They didn't get all the sacks, probably reflective of the pressure they put on. But last weekend, it did come home because we did say the Titans defense would not like to get home. The Chiefs defense has come on throughout the season, and I think they defensively, despite giving away so many points last weekend to a really strong Bills team, will play a lot better this weekend. I think they will get to Burrow, and I don't think the Bengals will get to Mahomes to the extent that the Chiefs will. And I'm looking at the Chiefs offense. You talked about the 42 points in the last 2 playoff games, but as a whole, Mahomes has averaged 33 points a game in the playoffs since he come into the league. If they put up those kind of points, I don't think the Bengals will be able to put up those kind of points. And that's why I'm siding with the Chiefs. I don't think it'll be a blowout. I think it'll be a close game. I think we'll be still in the third quarter asking the question. But I think they'll find enough, and I don't think we'll be coming down to 13 seconds or overtime like we did last week. I think the Bengals will hold their own and play really well, and there'll be a lot of hope for the future. But I think the Chiefs have the knack and have the know-how to go and win these games, and I think that's what's going to happen on Sunday.
I was looking forward to my weekly Brian blowout, but I know there's only 2 games left, so it's difficult. Okay, well, Mark is picking. Can you hear that? No,
I can, yeah.
The Chiefs. Mark is picking the Chiefs. Surprise, surprise. I just knew. And I was like, get the picks in.
Here we go.
What do you mean, here we go? What do you mean, here we go? What do you mean, here we go? Now, before I start, what do you mean by that? What's the...
I have a sneaking feeling I know where this is going.
Now, for the sake of this broadcast, Colin and Mark have no idea who I'm picking. Yeah,
nor do I.
Yeah, and of course, yeah. Eventually, by maybe the 4th season of the show, I will call Brian, and not Mark. I keep doing it by accident. Anyway, look, what can I say about the Kansas City Chiefs? Where do you start? I have to put up with them for 18 weeks now instead of 17 weeks, and it's soul destroying. Last week was a very, very hard thing to watch, but as I said Monday night, you have to give it to the Chiefs. The way that they came back with 13 seconds left is incomprehensibly superb. as Matt Derrick said in the show earlier on. And you know what, Matt Derrick, that was a fantastic conversation. Talking about Harrison Butker having ice in his veins, and under pressure they can perform well, and they've shown that not just this season, but over time. And as Matt also said, and as we've said in the show this year, the Chiefs didn't start great this season, and they've come into their own. I wouldn't agree with what Matt said in the fact of the Chiefs didn't care the first few. And I wouldn't go as far as that now. I don't think they were playing good football. They were starting to gel. It took them time, but they have gelled, and they're now in the AFC Championship game. Patrick Mahomes is 7-1 in the AFC playoff games with 23 touchdowns and 1 interception. And obviously a home field advantage with Arrowhead Stadium, or whatever it's called this week, is going to be a huge advantage to the Chiefs. And you'd have to hope that Patrick's wife won't start drinking champagne at any point. If anybody's seen that video last week, and Jackson Mahomes as well should have a nice little dance or two. He should go and dance with the stars. Anyway, look, it's going to be a close game, and I think I went on to a couple of Chiefs blogs today to see what they thought about their predictions for the game, and some people were putting 54-27, 51-21, and I was going, really? This Bengals team traveled to the number 1 seed last week and won. Granted, it wasn't pretty football. At sometimes it wasn't pretty football, and granted, Joe Burrow was getting hit more than a car going the wrong way on the motorway, right? But seriously, boys, it's going to be a close game. I think the Bengals could really be a force in this game, regardless of the result. I think the main thing is this: can the Bengals contain Tyreek Hill? They can try and cover Kelsey, but can they contain Hill and his speed? Cornerback Trey Waynes is out. I can't pronounce his name. Awuzie. And look, Eli Apple. Those two boys have got
if they put Eli Apple on him, you can just forget about it.
Well, Tyreek's caught 104 passes for nearly 1,200 yards, and he's got 9 touchdowns on the year. Eli Apple really needs to get on one this Sunday. And if he's not going to get on the AFC Championship, I don't know what is. On the other side of the ball, obviously Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. I look at that as a monumentally good offense in this league. And there's no reason why the Bengals can't go out and score as many points as the Chiefs. It's going to come down to the defense. The Chiefs allowed 245.7 passing yards a game. That's the 8th worst in the league, so it's not the worst. But I think the thing that's really interesting is Joe Mixon. The Chiefs are giving up 4.8 yards per carry. That's the 2nd worst in the NFL. Mixon has not done fantastically over the last 6 or 7 games in the season in terms of what he's done. He didn't get, I think, any more than 3.9 yards per carry or 65 yards a game on average over the last few games. But if he gets on one on Sunday, it could be a very interesting game. The big question mark is Honey Badger. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? I think both offenses are going to go mad, and it will do very well to get a game like last week. But I'm taking the Bengals. I'm taking the Bengals for the sheer fact that I think they're going to go out and score over 32 points in Arrowhead. And why the hell not? Because watch the game back last week. What the Chiefs done was stunning. But watch the defense for the Bills. And that's all I'm going to say. Good luck to both teams. I think it's going to be a fantastic game. And I'm taking Cincinnati. And I was going to do a whole shouting thing, but I don't want to wake my wife up. Cincinnati going to Super Bowl 56. And Joe Burrow runs the AFC. Can you imagine if that happens on Sunday? But genuinely, they'll score over 30 points. And something tells me, boys, this defense for the Bengals is going to have a hell of a day in Arrowhead. Because what the hell have the Bengals got to lose? And the Chiefs have everything to lose. Come on, the underdog, boys.
I just got a text saying Michael picks Bengals. Shock.
Who's that from?
The Packers fan.
No, it's not. How did they, like, this hasn't even went out yet. It's like there's like a 30-second delay on. Oh, come on. Anyway,
well,
look.
No, I'm telling you, I'm reading here. WhatsApp. Surprise. He goes for the Bengals.
Okay. I'm going with the Bengals. How can I pick the Chiefs? How the hell after last week can I pick the Chiefs? How?
Well,
I actually think they'll win.
I think they're capable of it, but I think how can you pick them? Because the Bills were the number 1 defense. The Bills had Josh Allen playing absolutely the best football of his career. The Bills had everything and threw everything at them. And the Bills specifically built to take on the Chiefs. And despite throwing absolutely everything at them, they couldn't get over the line. I'm not going to be surprised if the Bengals win. I think Joe Burrow is capable of doing it. We've seen him do it time and time again, particularly at this time of the year when it comes to crunch time. Burrow goes to another level, but so does Mahomes when it comes to the playoffs. And the other thing that will be interesting to see is there's been a lot of talk this year about the way in which keep Mahomes in check. You play the 2 high safeties. And teams were trying that, and then the Raiders decided not to try that, which allowed Mahomes to get back on track. And since then, Mahomes has learned how to do it, and hasn't always been pretty. And against the Bills, he faced the 2 high look on 92% of the time. But they weren't able to slow him down. He still got the points. And what he did was he used his feet. And I think Jeff talked about it. The Chiefs will always be innovative. It's really interesting to see. So he didn't have a pass with air yards of over 20 yards. First time in his career that he didn't throw massively in the air last week. But he got it done on the ground. I think that's a testament to Chief. I think this will be a fascinating matchup because I don't think you've got 2 fantastic QBs. And if you go back to the end of that Week 17 game, where Mahomes seeks Burrow out at the end of the game, and he says, "Keep going. We'll see you in the playoffs." Here we are. It's going to be fantastic.
Here we are, baby. All I'm going to say is you're damn right with the Bills defense. Of course, best in the NFL, right? Best in the NFL this season. But it doesn't make up for the fact they let go, 44 yards in 2 plays last week. And what happened was incredible. It was amazing. And I was like, this is class. This is unbelievable. Fair play to the Chiefs. And they were fantastic. But they should never have had the ball down there. And granted, the guys were run off their feet. And this is not a post-mortem. The Bills are out, as long as all the other teams we've talked about with coaches. So we're not going to focus on them 2 teams. I just think that Joe Burrow, after going into Tennessee last week, that crowd in the first half in Tennessee last week, boys, were loud. I've got a serious feeling this is Cincinnati's time, boys. Serious. I don't know what it is, but I'm taking it, Brian. I'm taking the Bengals, and it's not for the crowd. I actually genuinely think they're going to win on Sunday. And who knows? Maybe I'll be a complete idiot if they get blown out, but I don't care.
I know a lot of Bengals fans probably won't agree with this, and they'll think I'm on my high horse and I'm having a go at them. And it's not honest. Genuinely, it's not because they've had a fantastic season, but better teams would have beaten them there last Saturday because you get 9 sacks, and let's be fair, the offense performance by the Titans was horrendous, and even the play calling was horrendous because we never even alluded to on Monday night the fact that at 6-all, despite the penalty on the extra point, they then go for 2 when really at that stage of the game you should have taken the extra point because the dynamic, I know it doesn't go like for like thereafter, but the mindset of the game could completely change because it could have been 17-16 as opposed to 16, and the Titans could have been playing to get the first down to win the game as opposed to going to win the game. I thought that was a bizarre decision. I don't know if you had the opportunity to watch the 1-minute video during the week of Kelsey and Mahomes in those 13 seconds. I think it's from CBS's coverage during the week on their primetime show where they actually showed it. They're mic'd up, and Kelsey made Mahomes change the play, change the audible at literally the line of scrimmage as he was about to. It wasn't the play that was called, but Kelsey had recognised that the guys were going soft down the middle and said, "Go to me. I'll get the yards." And they did a great job at the end, but the Bills completely, in my opinion, imploded in those 13 seconds. And that's on the head coach and the defensive coordinator, who's still interviewing for jobs, bizarrely. Bearing in mind what happened at the end of the game. Look, it's got the makings of a great game, and the Bengals are deserving of being there because they've been really consistent throughout the year. And for the Chiefs team that struggles for large parts of the season to come back. I always think back to when we were in London and we were doing that show and people were asking, are the Chiefs doomed? And we all said, I think by and large we all agreed, hold your horses here. This team will find a way to at least be in the playoffs. And you get into the playoffs, you know what's going to happen then thereafter.
It's going to be a great game. 8 p.m. on Sunday. The Bengals, who have beaten the number 1 seed last week, going to Kansas City, who played incredible against the Bills in that incredible game last week. Going to be an absolute beezer of a game. Those are our picks. There we go. I'm going with the Bengals, and these 3 gents are going with the Chiefs. And we've gotten a little announcement at halftime in that game, so make sure you stay tuned for that there. It'll be on Twitter at around 9:45, 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
The second game is the NFC Championship, and it's the San Francisco 49ers against the LA Rams. Now, some of us have to drive to work on Monday morning. So this game's at 11:30 a.m. I wish it was 11:30 a.m. 11:30 p.m. The last late night game of the year for me, anyway. Our last Friday night show column of the year, live until September. I would say. I'm only joking, Brian. What's your thoughts, Colin, ahead of this NFC Championship? 49ers going in, and obviously they've beaten the Rams that many times now. It's hard to count, to be honest with you.
Yeah, but won the last 6. I suppose what strikes me, obviously, one of the things in relation to this, and going back to Brian's point, like ultimately what cost the Titans, what part was partly, or a huge part, was their quarterback. Ryan Tannehill is not elite. He's not on the level of Mahomes, of Burrow, and that ultimately cost them. And he really regressed this year. I think he had twice as many interceptions this year. When you look at what the Rams did, the Rams brought in Stafford with the whole idea of upgrading the quarterback position to allow them to, particularly in terms of the playoff games, it was very similar to bringing in Von Miller. It was less about the regular season, I think more about the playoffs, and kind of Von has caught fire after having a very slow start, coming back from injury, granted. So last week was a mad game. They could have put it away if Akers hadn't had the fumble, but he did, and then they allowed him back in, and then they won it at the end. What a gutsy call, and in Cooper Kupp, they just have an incredible receiver. Like, he is just phenomenal, and for the 49ers to win, they're going to have to find a way to keep him in check. I think that's the number one thing that they have to do. But they managed to do it with Devonta Adams. So can they do it a second week in a row? We know the Rams have incredible weapons on both sides of the ball, and the Rams should win this. They're at home. They're coming in hot. They should be the team to beat, and they should win it. This is the opportunity for them to play at home. But when you look at they say it's hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. And yeah, that impacts, but this is it's happened 22 times before, where teams have played in the playoffs, have met twice during the regular season. And the team that won those 2 are 14-8. So generally the team that won 2 goes on to win. Obviously, it didn't happen last year with the Bucs and the Saints. But it'll be interesting to see what happens here. For me, for the 49ers, it's all about getting to Stafford. It's all about their front 4 in particular, because their D-line is just fantastic. And it is then about will the best left tackle in the game be good to go? By the sounds of things, he might well be. I am going to say the Rams should win, but I think, Michael, you were talking about a feeling. I'm going to say that the 49ers are going to surprise people. It's not going to be a shock because they have Kyle Shanahan, but I think it's only if you have a Kyle Shanahan that you can get away with having a quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo. The biggest issue for San Francisco is Jimmy G could have a meltdown and throw interceptions all around. That's absolutely possible. And I think if there's a game that's more likely to be a blowout, it's this one. And if it is to be a blowout, I think it's more likely to be the Rams. But I don't think it happens. Deebo Samuel with the ball in his hand is a thing of beauty in the game. I'm going to back Deebo and Kyle Shanahan to take the 49ers back to the promised land.
Colin, you don't seem to have much love for Jimmy G, going back to our season preview show. Jimmy G's stats in the playoffs for the 49ers this season and 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl, it's the worst stats of a quarterback in 50 years. That's how poor. But then 49ers fans might say 2 years ago it was all about the run game and they didn't really need to use Jimmy G. But when they needed to use him in the Super Bowl, he couldn't get it done. In fairness to Stafford, last week and the week before, I know they had we call it a meltdown in the second half last week and they allowed the Bucs to recover. I don't think large parts of that were down to how Stafford played. There was fumbles, there was missed snaps over his head. A lot of that was outside of his control. So I felt he played very well, and he showed why they traded for him with that magnificent throw at the end, because in the past when he has played in the playoffs, he's struggled with the Lions those few times he's been in. And the previous week against Arizona, despite all the frailties of Kyler Murray in that offense, he had a comprehensive game. these two head coaches don't like each other. Let's be fair. Like, I know that people will say they had a working relationship in Washington. It's clear to say they don't have the best of relationships. So it's going to be a fierce rivalry on Sunday. That Week 18 defeat for the Rams is the only defeat they've had in the last 8. And going back in time, and we said it last month on the show, the run they were on, the last time they did that at that stage of the season, they went to the Super Bowl twice, 99, 2001. I believe they're going to go to the Super Bowl this weekend as well with a win. Yeah, it's weird how these teams come around. In fact, that they've lost both games this season and they've lost 6 in a row, but that streak has to end at some stage. And I think the Rams offensively will have more than enough to put points against this 49ers defense, in particular if the secondary struggles. And then we're in a situation where, is Jimmy G going to have enough? Will Debo get enough of the ball to do what he can do? Yes. But will he be able to do as much as the Rams if they get Beckham and Kupp and all the guys in the game? I don't believe so. I think we might see a rebound game from Akers, who obviously had those 2 fumbles last weekend. And I do think it'll be a very close game, but I think the Rams will find a way to win.
Okay, Brian has picked the Rams. Colin has picked the 49ers. Levi South, I love that comment, by the way, earlier on. And Mark is picking, drum roll for the podcast listeners, ASMR. He's picking the 49ers. Mark Cockerell picks the 49ers. So it's down to me.
I'd like to welcome Mark to
right
the 49ers train. Delighted that he decided to join me.
Oh.
Okay, bless me. Sneezed off camera there. Or off microphone there. Mark Hazelberg's, there's loads of comments here. So Ireland's Who Day said drum roll. He said hop out of it. HUPPOUTAVIT and like a emoji yes. With the my God. And then Sound Brian says Mark Hazelberg. I think that's just from there now. I think he's a Rams fan. Shout out to Rams. LA Rams, Northern Ireland. I'm going to give him a shout out the last 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to try and get him on the show if they win on Sunday. I don't know where he's from, if he's near me or what the crack is, but we'll see the crack. There's many things I can say about this game, and there's many things I could just say nothing and give my pick, but I'll say one thing and then I'll make it very short and very, very sweet. This game is all about the quarterbacks for me. Jimmy Garoppolo had a 141.7 passer rating in the first game against the Rams in Week 10. And then he followed that up with an incredible 17-point back deficit to come back in overtime in Week 18. Nobody cares anymore because while that was very impressive and incredible, and what the 49ers done last weekend was sensational, going to Green Bay. And was that last weekend? Yeah.
Seems like going to beat
that Green Bay Packers team, who were the greatest gift from God, if you were led to be believed, and I presume they were because everyone was talking about them. It doesn't matter anymore because any given Sunday, anything can happen. And the 49ers have got their chance in Levi's South, or in SoFi Stadium. It's a battle of California. It's the battle of the two teams trying to get to the Super Bowl in California. It's going to be box office. Matthew Stafford's wife's trying to give tickets away like nothing else. What Matthew Stafford is going to show up? Is it going to be the guy that goes for 568 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no picks against the Cards and the Bucks? I seen that earlier on. I was going, oof. Or is it going to be the Matthew Stafford that throws 2 or 3 picks? All I'm going to say, and I'm going to keep it short and I'm going to keep it sweet, the roster that this Rams team has, the ownership that the Rams team has, the experience that Sean McVay has had over the last few years in the Super Bowl, Stanley Kroenke's stadium. Stanley Kroenke is going to come home and he's going to cash that check. It's now or never for the Rams. I actually think if the Rams lose this game on Monday or on Sunday, we're going to have a serious conversation here on Monday because they expect that to be brought home. They've put the money down on both the offense and the defense. They've brought in the superstars, and they've done so well, like our guest Jake said, when they had Robert Woods go out to bring in Odell Beckham, and then have that combination between Van Jefferson as well. Tyler Higbee had 2 touchdowns in Week 18 as well. This should be a game with the Rams win. It should be, and that's why I'm taking the Rams, boys. I'm taking the Rams to host the Bengals in SoFi Stadium in 2 weeks' time. A home Super Bowl for Stanley Kroenke, Sean McVay, and Los Angeles Rams. And wouldn't it be nice to be there if that was the case?
That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it?
And I'm not avoiding picking the 49ers. I genuinely think what the 49ers done last weekend was superb. But I think the Rams will win based on just on their offense.
Owen put up. I never selected the 49ers. I think if he goes back to the season, I don't want to take too much time out. Go back and look at some of the charts for large parts of the season, I picked the 49ers quite a lot. At my peril at times.
If the Niners lose, does that make them no better than the Jags? Fred's all month tonight, and it's good.
Oh, see, Troy Aikman's on his way, I believe. Sorry, we're getting away from the games, but I don't know if you read the reports, but he's leaving Fox.
Oh, so is that another commentator that you don't like, Brian, or is that
Is that to make way for Sean Payton?
I'm not sure. I wasn't going to go there, Michael. I was just going to.
Yeah, apparently it's on Amazon. Yeah.
That's the word. Yeah.
That's going to be interesting next year though, because obviously we'll get the game on television, whereas Americans have to stream it. And what broadcast will we get? Mark's saying, so we got Shiro 1325. Let's go Rams. Mark saying, shocker, Michael is against the Niners. I'm not against the Niners. I literally went to the old Candlestick Park. I put pictures up on that. I loved it. Like I love the Bay, etc. But look, I'll say this for the Niners fans: if the 49ers beat the Rams in their home stadium, they more than deserve it. And let's be frank, it's basically half a home game for them. It would be a great Super Bowl whoever gets through, because offensively and defensively on both sides of the ball, both teams are great teams, and I'm looking forward to it.
And again, not to take away from the genuine Rams fans, but it's a pretty sorry state of affairs when a franchise has to limit who can buy tickets because they're worried about their own stadium getting taken over for a championship game.
Colin, if your picks come to be on Sunday and it's the 49ers Chiefs double, as you're calling out, you will have the exact same Super Bowl as which we had 2 years ago. Yeah. So Mark this year had gone for a repeat of last year's Super Bowl. In fact, it could be the repeat of 2 years ago. Interesting.
Just to repeat to Mark Hazelbrook on the live chat, I am not against the 49ers. I like Shanahan for obvious reasons, and I wish them the very, very best. They've been the Levi's as well. So no, I'm not against the 49ers. I just think the Rams are a better team. Have we any final comments or thoughts or any?
Yeah, I'd like to point that. Well, I'm interested to see how Shanahan manage this game on Sunday, because I know he's beaten them 6 times in a row, but the reality is it's a championship game. Both sides are here. I'm not sure how much relevance that has. And we've seen Shanahan in previous years in playoff games, both for the 49ers and when his time when he was coordinator, and that they give games away, essentially. He got away from the run, which was working efficiently against Chiefs 2 years ago. And I don't think we need to be going back over the old ground of the Falcons and how they managed to try that game away against Patriots. But ultimately, he was the man who was left taking a lot of responsibility for that on both counts. And, it'll be interesting to see if they're in a position where they're winning the game on Sunday. Does he get away from what he should be doing in order to get the team over the line? Maybe he's learned his lesson the hard way. Certainly last week, it was a big win for them to go into Green Bay, beating the 4 seeds. Okay, they didn't perform, but still, it's a big feather in his cap that he's gone and beaten that team in Lambeau. So, interesting to see how he goes about the game on Sunday.
Those are the picks. There's a couple of comments before we go here. Good Tyrone man here on the chat. Connor McGee, I think he's from Oma. Well said, Colin. Another Niners takeover and win, I'm hoping. If the Niners, we'll have to give Connor a shout if the Niners win, if he's up the road from me. Benji Whelan, thanks, Benji. I know you've been watching for a good bit here. Pointing out that the Titans also restricted tickets last week. And yes, I think that's us. We've obviously got, and without giving much away here, we've got a pretty crazy few weeks ahead of us, and it's going to be a good crack. We should have content going from there's going to be a few things on next week. We'll be back on Monday night to recap the championship games, and just looking forward, lads, for the next few weeks. It's going to be a big few weeks, and so we've got this is the picks for the first game or the second game, and these are the picks for the first game. So here we go, and we've also got an announcement on Sunday, Colin.
Yes, indeed. In the midst of 2 fantastic games, I really do think they will be both fascinating. We will have an announcement at halftime in the first game, so people aren't going to have to wait until kind of 1 a.m. for that. Hopefully in and around kind of the 9:30, 9:45 kind of mark, that should be coming out. But just to say that I think they will be fantastic games. Enjoy it. We are down to the last 3 games of the season before the off season. So definitely for everyone watching, enjoy them. They should be too.
Pro Bowl, 4 games.
They said They said it was a bad idea to have a week 18 because of player safety, but we discussed how crazy that week 18 was, and everybody said, you know what, that was really good. We discussed last weekend that those 4 divisional round games were potentially the best divisional round games we've seen in years. Certainly that last game with the Bills and the Chiefs was probably the best game I've seen in 10 years. And now we go into these 2 games this weekend where only one of the teams was there this time last year. So interesting to see what comes of Sunday, and then we'll be back Monday night having a great chinwag about what comes through these 2 games on Sunday.
And it will be 9 o'clock. I'm saying it now publicly. 9 o'clock on Monday night, whether we can make it or not. I am not doing 9:30, boys, after last week. That's us for now. Obviously, Jeff Reinbold in Dublin next weekend as well. We'll talk about that on Twitter during the week. Announcement Sunday night. Thanks to everyone for their support, to Matchbook, to Trust for the continued support. Appreciate everybody that's either watching this live, comment on YouTube, comment on Twitter. Sorry for getting your questions in. Everyone listening on the podcast, thank you so much. Just search Irish NFL Show podcasts, and we will see you very soon. Very, very soon. Looking forward to it. Boys, have a good time, yeah? All the best.
Enjoy the weekend. See you Monday.
Games. Thank you.
Slug of fight.